Chapter 578. That kitchen knife could actually make his kitchen knife tremble? The plain-clothed man narrowed his eyes. His heart was a little shocked. His kitchen knife was not an ordinary one. It was a spiritual kitchen knife forged by a master in the Valley of Gluttony who specialized in forging knives. It was extremely rare, and it was impossible to find such a kitchen knife in the outside world. Strictly speaking, the supreme blade tyrant's slaughter god blade was also a spiritual kitchen knife. Back then, when the supreme blade tyrant entered the Valley of Gluttony, he brought along materials and hired a master to forge a slaughter god blade. With this slaughter god blade, the supreme blade tyrant's battle prowess increased exponentially. His strength also became stronger. With his kitchen knife, he slaughtered many spirit beasts, including some divine beasts. However, the black kitchen knife in a youth's hand was actually able to make his spiritual kitchen knife tremble. What kind of kitchen knife was that? The middle-aged man looked straight at the kitchen knife in Bu Feng's hand, as though he wanted to see through it. However, no matter how he looked at it, the kitchen knife was still as black as before. There was not a single trace of anything special about it. It was extremely ordinary and ordinary. The slaughter god blade was kept into the system's dimensional storage by Bu Feng. The originally violent slaughter god blade became incomparably quiet after it entered the system's dimensional storage. Bu Feng twirled the knife around, and his gaze landed on the 5-flower armor pork. This was the meat of a spirit beast at the peak of the divine physique echelon, and it was extremely precious. It was also the most precious ingredient that Bu Feng had encountered so far. Of course, that was if the phoenix egg in his system's dimensional storage was not counted. Suddenly, Bu Feng seemed to have sensed something. He turned his head and looked into the distance. Huh? Bu Feng saw the middle-aged man, and the middle-aged man also saw Bu Feng. Their gazes collided in midair. The middle-aged man's mouth curled up, and he revealed a trace of a smile. The ice-blue kitchen knife in his hand shone with a dazzling brilliance. Bu Feng's attention was instantly attracted by the kitchen knife. The plain-clothed man seemed to have sensed Bu Feng's gaze. He waved the ice-blue kitchen knife in his hand and revealed an interested smile to Bu Feng. Bu Feng turned his head expressionlessly. He only felt that the kitchen knife was magical, but the man kept smiling at him, which made him feel weird and uncomfortable. As for Bu Feng, he turned his head and started to process the ingredients seriously. Bu Feng suddenly felt that it was not bad to have such a chance to cook such a precious ingredient. He spun the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand, then grabbed the handle and pressed down on the piece of meat on the chopping board. This piece of meat had a black carapace, and underneath it was the white and creamy pork. It was incomparably rich in essence energy. Bu Feng pressed down on the piece of pork, and the tip of the kitchen knife stabbed down. With a slight flick, he skillfully cut horizontally, separating the carapace from the pork. This set of movements was as smooth as flowing water, without the slightest bit of sloppiness. The plain-clothed man, who had been observing Bu Feng from afar, narrowed his eyes. He gave Bu Feng a deep look. Such skillful knife skills. Could this kid be a chef? The corners of the plain-clothed man's mouth curled up, and his heart was filled with interest. If he was really a chef, it would be interesting. This time's inheritance challenge would not be so boring. His ice-blue kitchen knife spun, and the tip of the knife, which was filled with cold energy, touched the carapace of the piece of meat. In the next instant, his movements were exactly the same as Bu Feng's, separating the carapace from a pork. After separating the pork, the plain-clothed man's face became serious. His kitchen knife continued to cut, cutting the white pork into pieces. The cut was smooth and neat. If one looked carefully, they could see that it was covered with a thin layer of ice crystals. Bu Feng was also calmly cutting the pork. His knife skills were very skilled, and he easily cut the pork into pieces. After he finished cutting, the kitchen knife swept across, and the pork fell onto the back of the knife. What dish was the best to cook with pork? Without a doubt, it was the red braised meat, especially this kind of pork that was filled with essence energy. The taste of the red braised meat would be very good. Bu Feng originally wanted to use the black turtle constellation wok, but there was already a wok on the stove. Hence, Bufong was taken aback. He did not take out the black turtle constellation wok, and instead he used the black wok on the stove to cook. Bufong did not even choose to use the heaven and earth obsidian flame. He simply ignited the flame on the stove. The flame burned, causing the temperature of the black wok to rise rapidly. When the temperature rose to a certain degree, Bufong poured the pork into the wok. Sizzle. The sound rang out, and smoke rose into the sky. In the distance, the plain-clothed man also ignited the wok. His ice crystal kitchen knife held the pork, and when the wok was boiling, he threw the pork into it. His choice was surprisingly the same as Bufong's. He also chose to cook the red braised meat. However, the difference between him and Bufong was that the flame he chose was his own flame. He activated the flame, and it burned fiercely. Soon, the aroma of the meat spread out from the wok. He was very satisfied. The meat of a spirit beast at the peak of the divine physique echelon realm was a rare ingredient. Moreover, with the Valley of Gluttony's secret technique, the spirit energy in the dishes he cooked could be preserved to a large extent, and it could even increase the aroma of the dishes. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. He shook the wok, and the flames instantly soared into the sky, illuminating his face. A confident smile hung on his face. As a chef of the Valley of Gluttony, outside of the Hidden Dragon Royal Court, he believed that his cooking skills were definitely the best, and no one could surpass his cooking skills. Besides Bufong and the plain-clothed man, the others also immersed themselves in cooking. The saintess of the ancient Shura city held the kitchen knife with trembling hands, and she carefully and slowly cut the pork. Her kitchen knife was provided by the stove, and since it was her first time holding a kitchen knife, the saintess felt that it was very magical. She bent her waist, and her red hair draped down, covering half of her exquisite face. It made her appearance even more obscure. Cooking. It was really difficult for the saintess of the ancient Shura city. However, the group of alchemists were even more frustrated. They could only stare blankly at the piece of pork. Besides being in a daze, what else could they do? Refine elixirs? Refine the pork as elixirs? What a joke. First of all, how could a piece of pork be refined into elixirs? Even if it could be refined, could the elixirs refined be eaten? The group of alchemists were very anxious, but they had no other choice. They could only hold the kitchen knife and start cutting the meat. After a while, all sorts of miserable cries rang out. Those were people who accidentally cut their fingers while cutting the meat. Some people were even more ruthless. They threw the whole piece of pork, including the shell, into the wok and directly boiled it. In just a short while, a charred smell wafted out. That person was immediately stunned. In this kitchen, all sorts of expressions appeared. The supreme blade tyrant stood in the distance with a face full of smiles. Looking at these people cooking, the smile on his face became bigger and bigger. Boom! Suddenly, an explosion rang out. Someone's black wok directly exploded, and the lid flew up into the sky. Along with it, a charred smell spread out. This was an alchemist. He looked at the flying lid in a daze. He always thought that only alchemy would cause cauldrons to explode. Who would have thought that cooking would also cause cauldrons to explode? The one who explodes the wok disqualifies. You can stay and accompany me. The supreme blade tyrant looked at that person gently and smiled. That alchemist's pupils instantly shrank. With a miserable cry, he turned around and ran. However, very quickly his body was bound. With a bang, his head directly exploded. He became a headless chef. Fresh blood splattered everywhere, landing on the experts who were cooking beside him. Those experts were so scared that their bodies trembled and they almost lost their grip on their wok spatulas. The supreme blade tyrant was indeed a madman. Although death was inevitable when facing the inheritance, this kind of cruel way of dying still made their hearts jump. When Bufong saw this scene, he instantly furrowed his brows, feeling a little disgusted in his heart. The cloth-clothed man glanced at the headless chef, and the corner of his mouth pulled up, revealing a trace of a disdainful smile. Losers are all weaklings. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Flames rushed into the sky. The cloth-clothed man waved his hand, and the lid instantly covered the black wok. The flames dissipated, and from within the black wok came a rumbling sound of boiling. The rumbling sound traveled to the man's ears, causing him to narrow his eyes. After a while, he opened the wok, and a thick wave of fragrance instantly spread out, spreading in all directions. It was full of temptation. The surrounding people who were diligently cooking could not help but stop what they were doing. They deeply inhaled the fragrance, and their faces were filled with intoxication. It really smells good. So this meat can really be cooked so fragrant. Why did I cook it a little bitter? Nonsense. My cooking is still a little sour. Many people around were muttering in low voices. They looked at the strange dishes in their wok, and they were a little speechless. They always felt that the style of their dishes was somewhat different. When Bufang smelled this fragrance, his heart was bewildered. His brows arched, and he turned his head to look at the cloth-clothed man. This fragrance, it's the fragrance of the authentic red braised meat. Bufang's heart shuddered. It was even comparable to his red braised meat. He did not expect that in the hidden dragon continent, there was actually a chef who could cook such a dish. The cloth-clothed man grinned at Bufang. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. After flipping the black wok, a moment later, the ladle shook and the red braised meat was scooped up. A white porcelain plate was prepared, and the cloth-clothed man poured the red braised meat into the porcelain plate. Then, he poured the fragrant broth over it. A crystal-clear red braised meat was completed. Everyone looked at this scene in awe. It was just like a work of art. The saintess played with her hair. She had finally finished cutting the meat. Although the size of the meat was different, at least it was done. Previously, she had been paying attention to Bufang's actions, and she had memorized the sequence of Bufang's cooking. At this moment, she was somewhat confident as she started to cook. She knew that Bufang was the only chef present, and if she didn't learn from Bufang, who else could she learn from? However, the sure saintess would never have thought that. Bufang wasn't the only chef here. There were still many other chefs. In the distance, the two people who were cooking on the stove had also finished cooking. Their dishes were also emitting a fragrance. The two of them turned their heads. One was skinny, and the other was fat. They were the brothers Alu and Alwei, who were the first to enter the big city. Brother? Look, isn't that senior uncle? After Alu finished cooking, he took out a chicken drumstick and stuffed it into his mouth. He looked at the cloth-clothed man in the distance and said to Alwei, who was at the stove beside him. However, Alwei didn't seem to hear Alu's words. His gaze landed on Bufang, and there seemed to be a fire burning in his eyes. Honorbu also came, just in time. He could finally have another cooking duel with Honorbu. This was a true battle between chefs. In the next instant, Bufang hooked his hand, and the lid of the wok was slowly opened. The rich fragrance of the meat soared into the sky. Chapter 579. When he knew that he had to cook, Luo Li's heart rejected it. It wasn't because he didn't know how to cook, but because he didn't like to cook. Even though he was one of the top geniuses in the ancient Shura city, Luo Li was not born in a rich family. When he was young, Luo Li grew up in the slums. He was different from the saintess. The saintess was born with a golden spoon in her mouth. When she was born, she was surrounded by stars and was destined to be extraordinary in the future. As for Luo Li, he was able to achieve what he had today through blood and tears. He sacrificed a lot, but he also gained a lot. However, the memories of his childhood were hard to forget. Cooking was already a very distant memory in his mind. At that time, he was still working in a restaurant in the ancient Shura city. Shaking his head, Luo Li retracted his thoughts. He opened the lid of the wok, and instantly, a wave of heat surged out, accompanied by a familiar aroma, causing Luo Li to have mixed feelings. He didn't like to cook, but he knew how to cook. He scooped out the dish from the wok. The dish that was emitting a mesmerizing light caused many people to look at it. Even Ashura's saintess face was full of surprise. She really didn't know that Luo Li actually had such an ability. Only those who had personally cooked would know how difficult it was to cook. The Shura saintess had followed Bufang's movements and copied it stroke by stroke. But when it was finally taken out of the wok, she realized that compared to Bufang's dish, it was like heaven and earth. even though there was an aroma. Compared to the aroma of Bu Fong's red braised meat, it was like the difference between a firefly and the moon. Opening the lid, Bu Fong scooped out the shining red braised meat and poured it into the blue and white porcelain plate that he had prepared. Compared to the white plate, Bu Fong preferred to use the blue and white porcelain plate because it looked more stylish. As time passed, the cooking process gradually came to an end. 50 experts joined the cooking army. Some succeeded, some failed. Those who failed had already turned into headless chefs in the distance. And those who succeeded did not relax at all, because they knew that the real test had yet to come. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's face was full of smiles. Smelling the aroma in the air, he could not help but narrow his eyes. It was as if he had released his body and mind, enjoying it. How nostalgic, it's really fragrant, the Supreme Blade Tyrant muttered. Very soon, he opened his eyes, and his gaze became incomparably cold. He glanced at everyone, starting from the first expert. Beads of perspiration appeared on the expert's forehead, and his entire body was trembling nervously. Looking at the Supreme Blade Tyrant approaching step by step, this expert's mind seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. "Don't be nervous. Let this Supreme see your dish," the Supreme Blade Tyrant said gently. However, that gentleness caused the expert's heart to palpitate even more. The expert slowly pushed out the dish he had just finished cooking. It was a dish that looked terrible. There was little gravy, and the color of the dish was pitch black. The Supreme Blade Tyrant grabbed the dish, lifted it up, and moved his nose closer to it, smelling it. That expert stared at the Supreme Blade Tyrant. Suddenly, his pupils shrank, and his face turned bloodless. That was because after the Supreme Blade Tyrant took a whiff of his dish, he coldly glanced at him. "Is this what you cooked? You want my inheritance, and you take out this kind of thing for me to eat? Burnt smell, stinky smell, meat shell, all of them are not processed well. You completely fail. Stay here and practice your culinary skills," the Supreme Blade Tyrant coldly said. That expert's mind shrank, and in the next instant, he let out an angry roar. No, I don't want to die. I don't want the inheritance. Let me go." This expert instantly exploded, and the true energy on his body surged, like the clouds rolling. Rumble. However, the Supreme Blade Tyrant only continued to sneer. Looking at the expert who exploded, his eyes revealed a trace of disdain. This was his soul sea space. In here, he was a god, and no one could stop him. With a casual wave of his hand, that expert's scream stopped abruptly. His entire person stood on the spot, and in the next instant, it was as if his head was instantly crushed and fresh blood splattered all over the ground. Another headless chef appeared. The Supreme Blade Tyrant seemed to have done something insignificant, and he slowly walked with his hands behind his back. He continued to taste, and there were more people who had become headless chefs. As more and more headless chefs appeared, everyone felt even more fear in their hearts. This Supreme Blade Tyrant was indeed a madman. The cloth-clothed man was very calm. When the Supreme Blade Tyrant walked in front of him, the corner of his mouth even curled up into a confident smile. "Supreme, please have a taste. This is the crystal red braised meat that I cooked." The cloth-clothed man casually waved his hand, and in an instant, true energy supported the white plate, pushing the dish in front of the Supreme Blade Tyrant. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's gaze deeply looked at the cloth-clothed man, and in the next instant, his gaze landed on the dish. Just by looking at it, the Supreme Blade Tyrant's gaze revealed a trace of intoxication. Crystal red braised meat. What a familiar dish, the Supreme Blade Tyrant sighed. A pair of chopsticks made of red spiritual materials landed in the hands of the Supreme Blade Tyrant. He picked up a piece of sparkling and translucent red braised meat that seemed to have turned into a sparkling red crystal. After admiring it for a while, he stuffed it into his mouth. Slurp, slurp. Once it entered his mouth, it was oily but not greasy. That kind of soft and tender feeling made the Supreme Blade Tyrant's eyebrows unconsciously twitch, and his face revealed a happy expression. The taste of the Valley of Gluttony, a familiar taste. "Are you from the Valley of Gluttony?" The supreme blade tyrant opened his eyes, looking at the cloth-clothed man with a smile. "I am the Valley of Gluttony's new generation walker, Wenrinchel." The corner of the cloth-clothed man's mouth curled up, and he respectfully bowed towards the supreme blade tyrant. He was very confident because he believed that in terms of culinary skills, no one was a match for the Valley of Gluttony. This time, he was determined to obtain the inheritance. One had to know that the supreme blade tyrant and the Valley of Gluttony had an unspeakable relationship. A walker from the Valley of Gluttony? Not bad, not bad. The supreme blade tyrant put down the plate, nodded his head, and smiled warmly. This Wenrincho's crystal red braised meat was the most delicious dish he had ever eaten. However, since the other party was from the Valley of Gluttony, he was not surprised at all. Wenrincho's words, however, caused the hearts of many to tremble. Some people knew of the Valley of Gluttony, while some did not. This was because the Valley of Gluttony was located within the Hidden Dragon Royal Court, and was a force that belonged to the Hidden Dragon Royal Court. It was a force that was formed entirely by chefs. This force was very strong, or rather, the forces within the Hidden Dragon Royal Court were all monstrous existences. Even the ancient Shura city, in front of these forces, was somewhat weak. The Shura Saintess had naturally heard of the Valley of Gluttony. She did not think that there would be someone from the Valley of Gluttony in this inheritance. Since this Wenrincho was from the Valley of Gluttony, then this little chef, Bufong, was definitely not from the Valley of Gluttony. Who exactly was Bufong? A self-taught monstrous chef? There is only one walker from the Valley of Gluttony, and it was impossible for there to be two. If Wenrincho was a chef from the Valley of Gluttony, then who was Bufong? This became the doubt in the Shura Saintess' heart. The supreme blade tyrant did not say anything, and he continued to walk to the next dish. Luoli passed the dish to the supreme blade tyrant. It was a plate of rosy red braised meat. The color was bright, and it conformed to the norm. The supreme blade tyrant ate a piece of meat, and his eyebrows twitched. He looked at Luoli in surprise, nodded his head, and did not say anything. Although the taste could not be compared to Wenrincho's red braised meat, this dish contained a special meaning. It was a taste of experience. As they ate, some were nervous and some were in despair. There were many more headless chefs. Everyone was trembling in fear, especially the alchemists. Almost all of them were wiped out, and almost all of them became headless chefs. It was extremely tragic. Alu and Awe were originally proficient in cooking, and they satisfied the supreme blade tyrant and survived. When the supreme blade tyrant ate her red braised meat, the Shura Saintess' heart almost jumped out of her chest. She thought that she was about to fail, but what surprised her was that the supreme blade tyrant actually nodded his head at her and continued to taste the next dish. He passed just like that? The Shura Saintess did not dare to believe it, and her heart was suddenly a little excited. So, cooking was actually so simple. Finally, the supreme blade tyrant came in front of Bufong. Bufong expressionlessly looked at the supreme blade tyrant. Towards this arrogant fellow, Bufong did not have a good impression of him. "Your dish." The supreme blade tyrant smiled warmly. "On the table," Bufong calmly said. The supreme blade tyrant's lips curled up, and he looked at Bufong. Then his gaze landed on the red braised meat on the table. With this look, his eyes slightly shrank because in his eyes, this red braised meat seemed to be bursting with light. A dish that could shine? The supreme blade tyrant was in a daze, and there was a feeling of déjà vu. That year in the Valley of Gluttony, he had also eaten dishes that could shine. That taste was something that he could not forget even until now. Wenrincho, who was far away, also looked deeply at Bufong's dish. His expression was incomparably solemn. That was actually a red braised meat that could shine. This young brat in front of him, his culinary skills were actually so strong. Even if it was a chef from the Valley of Gluttony, if he wanted to cook a dish that could shine, he would have to go through countless cruel training. This chef in front of him could actually do it. What qualifications did he have to do it? Wenrincho realized that he seemed to have underestimated this brat from the start. The red chopsticks landed, picking up a piece of springy red braised meat. As the chopsticks picked up, the oil in the meat flowed down, emitting a rich fragrance. It made people salivate when they smelled it. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's breathing suddenly became a little heavier, and he picked up a piece of red braised meat. The red sauce accompanied the meat, and it was stretched out, emitting hot steam. As the piece of meat entered his mouth, the Supreme Blade Tyrant's eyes suddenly widened, and a bright light overflowed. The expression on his face gradually revealed an excited expression. Slurp, slurp. As the piece of red braised meat entered his stomach, the Supreme Blade Tyrant subconsciously put down his chopsticks a second time, picking up the meat. Along with the thick sauce, the sauce stained his lips, causing him to stick out his tongue and lick it, his face full of infatuation. Everyone's appetite increased as they watched. Was this red braised meat really that delicious? When Rincho took in a deep breath and his eyes narrowed, he knew that he should have lost. Because when the Supreme Blade Tyrant ate his red braised meat, he only ate one bite, but when he ate Bufong's red braised meat, he actually ate 2 bites. He did not think that he, the Valley of Gluttony's wanderer, when Rincho, would actually lose to an unknown chef. Humiliation. A flame instantly burned in one Rincho's heart, but when he heard what Bufong said next, his anger boiled even more. You are also a chef from the Valley of Gluttony? The Supreme Blade Tyrant licked his lips, looking deeply at Bufong. Bufong glanced at him, and his brows furrowed, saying, Valley of Gluttony? What's that? Chapter 580. Valley of Gluttony? What was that? When Bufong said those words, he was very calm, because he really did not know what the Valley of Gluttony was. He knew that gluttony was a type of ancient ferocious beast, but so what? Could it be that just because he knew how to cook, he was related to the Valley of Gluttony? When the Supreme Blade Tyrant heard Bufong's words, he was stunned for a while. This was the first time he heard a chef talk about the Valley of Gluttony like that. According to common sense, shouldn't the Valley of Gluttony be the holy land in every chef's heart? Why did this chef, with such exquisite culinary skills, not seem to care about the Valley of Gluttony at all? When Rincho's eyes were about to spit fire, this chef, he actually dared to talk about the Valley of Gluttony like that. The Valley of Gluttony was a holy land in his heart, a place where the elite chefs of the entire Hidden Dragon continent gathered. It was fine if others did not know about the Valley of Gluttony, but as a chef, and such an amazing one at that, how could he not have heard of the Valley of Gluttony? And he even showed such a look of disdain? Was this guy trying to stir up trouble? Bufong's calm and innocent expression fell into everyone's eyes, and it made many people who knew about the Valley of Gluttony speechless. The Shura Saintess was even more speechless. This guy really wasn't from the Valley of Gluttony. Luo Li glanced at him, and the corner of his mouth twitched in disdain. If Bufong was from the Valley of Gluttony, he might really be a little afraid. But since Bufong wasn't from the Valley of Gluttony, what was there for him to be afraid of? If that was the case, he could calmly snatch the Shura Tower back from Bufong's hands. After all, the Shura Tower was their ancient Shura city's divine tool, and it couldn't be left outside. You, shut up. The Valley of Gluttony isn't something that people like you can criticize. Don't think that you can mock the Valley of Gluttony just because you cooked a dish that surpassed mine. The clothes on when Rincho's body bulged, and a terrifying aura spread from his body. Everyone's heart shuddered. This plain-clothed chef's cultivation had actually reached the peak of the divine physique echelon. No wonder he came from the Valley of Gluttony. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flickered as if he had sensed the hostility from Bufong. He stepped out from behind Bufong, and the armor on his body made a clanging sound. The ancient Shura City Saintess and the others narrowed their eyes. After all, Bufong's puppet was extremely powerful. Was a war about to break out? However, the great battle did not happen in the end. The Supreme Blade Tyrant would also not allow anyone to act recklessly in his Soul Sea space. No matter where you chefs are from, since you've come to my Soul Sea space, cook well, strive to survive. The Supreme Blade Tyrant had a warm smile on his face. He glanced at Bu Fong meaningfully, then looked at Wen Rincho in the distance, casually waving his hand. Instantly, a terrifying pressure was exerted on Wen Rincho's body, causing his expression to change. He took a deep breath and slowly retracted the true energy on his body. However, the gaze he used to look at Bu Fong had already become very unfriendly. Looking down on people from the Valley of Gluttony, with your mediocre cooking skills? Very soon, you'll feel despair for your arrogance. When Rincho felt that he had to bring out his true abilities, Bu Fong patted Xiao Bai's plump belly, and Xiao Bai instantly retreated. Facing Wen Rincho's words, the corner of Bu Fong's mouth twitched. Idiot! Wen Rincho coldly snorted, the anger in his heart surging. However, he controlled himself and did not explode. After all, the Supreme Blade Tyrant was present. Bu Fong's dish naturally passed the Supreme Blade Tyrant's test, but the test was not over. In the distance, Han Li's entire body was trembling. He did not think that what he thought was an opportunity would turn out to be a death trap. He, who did not know any cooking skills, entered the Supreme Blade Tyrant's inheritance. It was as awkward as sending his head to the ground. Looking at the black charcoal-like thing in the black wok on the stove in front of him, his heart instantly turned cold. When the Supreme Blade Tyrant's gaze turned over, Han Li's entire body trembled. Hung pung pung. The Supreme Blade Tyrant was getting closer and closer to his stove. As for his guards, they all let out pitiful cries as their heads exploded one by one, turning into headless chefs. Finally, the Supreme Blade Tyrant's gaze landed on him. It was his turn. Where's your dish? The Supreme Blade Tyrant's expression was indifferent as he glanced at Han Li. Han Li's heart instantly shrank, and his entire body was a little cold. Han Li opened his mouth, but he could not say a single word. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's gaze landed on the black wok in front of Han Li. His eyes flashed, and instantly, the dish in the black wok automatically floated up. A wave of fresh and unaffected stench wafted out from within. The moment the Supreme Blade Tyrant smelled it, his face turned a little black. What kind of damn smell is this? To be able to make such a dish, you should just stay behind and properly practice your culinary skills with this Supreme. The moment the Supreme Blade Tyrant's words fell, Han Li felt as though the blood in his entire body had frozen. No, I can't die. It was as though he was in a hopeless situation. Han Li let out a roar, and his eyes exploded with a wave of determination. The true energy in his body surged out at this moment, gathering behind his back, turning into 5 swaying shackles. A long spear instantly appeared, tearing through the air and piercing towards the Supreme Blade Tyrant's head. On the spearhead, it was as though there was a divine dragon roaring, bringing with it a terrifying killing power. As the commander of the Pill Palace, Han Li's strength was really strong. At the very least, the power of this spear caused many people to feel shocked. Bu Fong was also slightly shocked. So this fellow's strength was actually so strong. However, the plainclothes chef, Azura Luo Li, and the rest all coldly laughed in disdain. In the soul sea space of a Divine Soul Realm expert, he actually dared to attack a Divine Soul Realm expert. Wasn't he looking for death? The corner of the Supreme Blade Tyrant's mouth rose. In his soul sea space, he was a god, an invincible god. Facing Han Li's spear that had burst out to its limit, the Supreme Blade Tyrant only raised his palm, casually waving it. Then, a streak of white blade energy was like a fallen leaf being blown by the autumn wind, lightly floating down. Boom! The spear that was like the roar of a divine dragon collided with the light, falling leaf, creating a terrifying explosion. Shock waves rushed into the sky, and smoke billowed. That streak of white blade energy easily broke through all of Han Li's strength, smashing him onto the ground. Han Li struggled to crawl up from the ground, coughing out blood. His body was covered with wounds, and the clothes on his body were dyed red. However, his eyes were filled with a vicious aura. He was a greedy person. He was a person with ambition. How would he die here like this? Another spear pierced out. This spear's speed was even faster than before. so fast that it was hard for people to catch it. The Shurasaintis and the rest narrowed their eyes. This Han, Lee actually still had a trick up his sleeve. This move was very vicious. The Supreme Blade Tyrant really did not seem to be able to react, and his head was directly pierced by this spear. At this moment, the entire place became silent. Han Li held onto the long spear, his eyes bloodshot. His mouth continued to cough out blood, but as he coughed out blood, he revealed a crazed smile. Ha ha! The Supreme Blade Tyrant is already dead. You are just a remnant of the Supreme Blade Tyrant's soul sea. Ha! You can't kill me. I want to live. However, his laughter soon came to a screeching halt because the Supreme Blade Tyrant, whose head was pierced, indifferently glanced at him. Raising his hand, he grabbed onto the long skirt and slowly pulled it out. His other hand raised up, grabbing onto Han Li's head. Live? Although I, the Supreme Blade Tyrant, am dead. But you, a divine physique echelon trash, want to live after acting cool in front of the Supreme? When this daddy was alive, I even dared to kill divine beasts. Who do you think you are? Kacha. A miserable howl. Han Li's voice tore apart, becoming louder and louder. In the end, with a loud bang, his voice suddenly stopped. An expert who had broken through 5 Supreme Being shackles fell just like that, becoming a headless chef. The hole in the Supreme Blade Tyrant's head slowly healed, and very quickly, it returned to normal. His cold eyes swept across the people who were still alive, and they were incomparably cold. Bu Fong expressionlessly looked at Han Li's corpse on the ground, not knowing what to say at that moment. Don't expect anyone to come and save you. In my soul, sea space, if you want to live, you can only continue cooking, the Supreme Blade Tyrant said. The Supreme Blade Tyrant said. He opened his mouth and revealed a sinister smile. He stared at the crowd like a poisonous snake. Next, it's the second stage of the inheritance. I hope that you can cook even more delicious dishes for the sake of survival. The Supreme Blade Tyrant said. In the next instant, the entire scene in the kitchen suddenly distorted, becoming blurry. After becoming blurry, after a while, it became clear again. The crowd realized that they were still standing in the kitchen. However, the number of stoves in the kitchen had become extremely few. There were only 5 stoves left, and there were still 10 people who survived. Were they still going to continue fighting for the stoves? If they couldn't, they would become headless chefs? Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. This was a little cruel. One had to know that the majority of the people who were left were not weak. Once they fought, it would become very terrifying. Don't worry, this time, I won't let you fight for the stoves. This time, there are 5 stoves, but there are 10 of you, so I need you to pair up and cook a delicious dish. If the dish is not up to standard, then the 2 of you will stay behind and accompany me, the Supreme Blade Tyrant said. Everyone was stunned. A pair of pears? What was he trying to do? I forgot to tell you. This time, the cooking is limited to a recipe. What you have to do is cook according to the recipe, and the final evaluation will be judged by this Supreme. The Supreme Blade Tyrant clasped his hands behind his back, and the corner of his mouth curled up. His bright eyes stared at the crowd. Now, you can start choosing your partners. Supreme, can we not need partners? Wen Rinchou furrowed his brows as he said. He did not like to have partners beside him when he was cooking. Bu Fong was also concerned about this problem. However, the Supreme Blade Tyrant did not reply him, and only casually waved his hand. Instantly, pages of recipes flew out, landing in everyone's hands. My soul sea space, do things according to my rules or else die, the Supreme Blade Tyrant said indifferently. Everyone's heart trembled, and they did not speak anymore. Bu Fong's gaze landed on the recipe in his hands, and he furrowed his brows, feeling a little curious. In the distance, when Rinchou saw the recipe, and his face instantly changed color. Burning heart-ripping claw. Isn't this a second-grade dish from the Valley of Gluttony? However, after Bu Fong finished looking at the recipe, he also heard Wen Rinchou's exclamation, and his face instantly became a little strange. What burning heart-ripping claw? Isn't this just mala chicken claw? Chapter 581. Burning Heart-Ripping Claw. This was the name of the recipe in Bu Fong's hands. It recorded the cooking method of a type of spirit beast claw. The spirit beast used was a divine realm bird-type spirit beast, which was similar to a chicken claw. It sounded very classy, but in Bu Fong's eyes, it was really a mala chicken claw. It was similar to a chicken claw dish in Bu Fong's previous life, but the process of the dish in his previous life was much more complicated than the one in this recipe. When Rin Shou, who was far away, coldly glanced at Bu Fong. He had accidentally heard Bu Fong's grumbling, and his heart instantly felt a little unhappy. What was a mala chicken claw? The burning heart-ripping claw was a second-grade dish of the Valley of Gluttony, and only a second-grade chef could cook it. What did this little chef know? He actually compared such a noble second-grade dish to a low-grade mala chicken claw. That's right, this burning heart-ripping claw is a recipe that this Supreme brought out from the Valley of Gluttony. That year, when this Supreme entered the valley, the first dish that I ate was this burning heart-ripping claw. That kind of delicious feeling, the kind of unforgettable feeling that almost made one's body burn, this Supreme will always remember it clearly. The Supreme Blade Tyrant narrowed his eyes and said with a sigh. It was as if whenever this topic was brought up, the taste of the burning heart-ripping claw would unknowingly appear in his mind. The Saintess and the rest found it hard to understand. However, chefs like Bu Fong and Wen Rin Shou could clearly understand the Supreme Blade Tyrant's feelings. A truly delicious dish would be unforgettable, and that taste would be deeply engraved in the depths of one's memory. To be able to make a divine soul realm expert so intoxicated, it seems that this mala chicken claw is really not ordinary. The surest Saintess muttered. When Rin Shou's eyes instantly widened. What mala chicken claw? That's called the burning heart-ripping claw. It's a second-grade dish. Second-grade dish? Bu Fong narrowed his eyes. There are different grades for this dish. This Valley of Gluttony was really interesting. They actually graded their dishes. Will they also grade their chefs? All right, there are still 10 of you left. Now, this Supreme will give you 2 breaths of time to form your teams. The Supreme Blade Tyrant recovered from his reminiscence, opened his eyes, and swept his gaze across the entire place. Everyone's heart shuddered. Then, everyone rushed out at different speeds. The Shura Saintess and Luo Li were naturally in the same group, although the Shura Saintess was very unwilling in her heart, because she felt that there was more hope in following the little chef, Bu Fong. However, under Luo Li's assurance, she couldn't refuse. Lu and Wei had undoubtedly become a team. The two of them were brothers, and when they worked together, they were extremely close. Beside Bu Fong was a middle-aged man. After receiving Bu Fong's approval, the man was ecstatic. Bu Fong was the champion of the previous round. If he could follow him, he would definitely win this round. Beside Wen Rin Shou was an expert who had luckily passed the first round. This expert was similarly ecstatic. To be able to follow the chefs of the Valley of Gluttony, their chances of survival were naturally high. As for Bu Fong and Wen Rin Shou, they had the same request, which was to not disturb them while they were cooking. As assistant chef apprentices, they only needed to prepare the cooking tools. Naturally, the two of them wouldn't reject, and they continuously nodded their heads. The teams were all allocated. Next, it was time to start cooking. This time, Wen Rin Shou didn't dare to underestimate his opponent. He had already treated Bu Fong as his biggest enemy. He had to defeat Bu Fong in the path of cooking, and let Bu Fong feel the terrifying pressure from the chefs of the Valley of Gluttony. Let this little chef know the strength of the Valley of Gluttony, and let him feel despair. Bu Fong didn't really care about Wen Rin Shou. In truth, he didn't know much about the Valley of Gluttony. Although Wen Rin Shou's culinary skills weren't bad, it was just so... Bu Fong really didn't care about it. He opened the cabinet under the stove and took out a spirit beast claw that was covered with steel-like scales. This should be a spirit beast claw of a bird, and there were still some feathers on it. The claw was sharp and slightly curved, like a steel knife that glowed with a cold light. Without a doubt, this spirit beast was definitely a terrifying and violent spirit beast when it was alive. Bu Fong's eyes lit up. The quality of this spirit beast claw was not bad, and it was very uniform. There were no calluses on it, which guaranteed the meat quality and texture of the claw. Holding the chicken claw, Bufong squeezed it everywhere, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. He was quite satisfied. Is there anything I can help with? The expert who followed Bufong looked at Bufong, licking his lips as he asked. Bufong turned his head to look at him, and after thinking for a while, he opened his mouth and said, "Wait a moment, help me deal with some ingredients." After saying that, Bufong took out many spirit herbs from the system's dimensional bag. The spirit herbs were filled with rich essence energy, and spiritual energy was overflowing. Swish! A big pile of chili was taken out by Bufong, and he poured it on the stove. Deal with all these chili, and cut the middle part of the chili, and take out everything inside, Bufong said calmly to the expert. The expert was stunned, but he immediately nodded, took the kitchen knife on the stove, and started to deal with the chili. One Rinchou, who was far away, also ordered his subordinates to do the same. However, the way when Rinchou ordered his subordinates to deal with the chili was different from Bufong. He ordered his men to cut all the chili into small pieces. As if sensing Bufong's gaze, when Rinchou raised his chin and revealed a serious expression. Burning heart-ripping claw, this was a second-grade dish. When Rinchou's cooking skills in the Valley of Gluttony had also reached the second-grade level, so he was very confident in cooking this dish. When Rinchou did not know Bufong's cooking level, but he believed that it would not be easy for Bufong to cook this dish. Second-grade dishes naturally had their own difficulties. There were many details, and if one was not handled carefully, it could easily cause the taste of the dish to change. This was also the difficulty of cooking a dish. Green smoke curled around his hand, and the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in Bufong's hand. Bufong's face was calm, and with a flick of his finger, the dragon bone kitchen knife spun in his hand, and the knife light flashed. With a slap, Bufong held the kitchen knife tightly, and with one hand, he pressed down on the spirit beast claw and prepared to deal with it. The side of Rinchou's body seemed to be filled with ice crystals, and the ice crystal kitchen knife appeared, emitting cold air. He infused his true energy into it, and the kitchen knife seemed to come alive. He held the ice crystal kitchen knife and fiercely cut down, cutting off all the nails of the spirit beast claw. Moreover, as the knife scraped past, a clanging sound rang out, and the hard scales on the spirit beast claw broke off. His actions of dealing with the spirit beast claw were very skillful, and it was obvious that he had cooked this dish before. Hence, his expression was filled with confidence. On the other hand, Bufong's actions were not so smooth. Bufong held the spirit beast claw and observed it repeatedly. He was carefully sizing it up, and no one knew what he was observing. Beside Bufong, the temporary assistant carefully dealt with the chili. The spicy smell instantly filled the air, and it rushed into the assistant's eyes, causing them to turn red. Bufong glanced at the assistant, and with a wave of his hand, the black turtle constellation walk floated out, and Bufong added the Heaven Alps Spirit Spring water into it. In the next instant, he opened his mouth and spat out a golden flame. Once this flame appeared, it instantly caused the temperature of the entire space to rise. Many people's hearts shuddered. When Rinchou's eyes shrank, this guy, he actually used the Heaven and Earth Obsidian flame to cook. When Rinchou's eyes revealed a trace of shock, the Heaven and Earth Obsidian flame was very violent and unstable, and its temperature was extremely high, making it very difficult to control. Ordinary chefs rarely dared to use the Heaven and Earth Obsidian flame to cook. Under normal circumstances, chefs from the Valley of Gluttony would use the flame when some spiritual ingredients were burned. That kind of flame was not only gentle, but when the spiritual ingredients were burned, the smoke that rose would also have a certain supporting effect on the dish. Gurgle gurgle. Under the burning of the Heaven and Earth Obsidian flame, the Heaven Alps Spirit Spring water in the black turtle constellation Wok quickly boiled. Bufong's assistant was cutting the chili with tears in his eyes, and he looked at Bufong's actions with a strange look. He saw Bufong lift the dragon bone kitchen knife and instantly, the spirit beast claw was sent flying, falling into the boiling black turtle constellation walk. The assistant was stunned because Bufong did not deal with this spirit beast claw at all. The scales were not shaved, and the nails were not dealt with either. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. A wave of white smoke rose, and the chicken claw floated in the black turtle constellation walk. Very quickly, a blood-red color seeped out from the spirit beast claw. Continue cutting. After dealing with these chili, scoop out half a spoonful of chili sauce from this jar and mix it with the chili to make a chili sauce. While waiting for the spirit beast claw, Bufong took out a crystal jar and placed it beside the assistant, saying, "However, after Bufong put down the crystal jar, he turned his head to look at the supreme blade tyrant in the distance. His brows instantly furrowed, and he added, 'Scoop up a spoonful. Half a spoonful is not enough.' The assistant was dumbfounded, and he nodded his head. There was so many chili, and he still wanted to add chili sauce? However, he was only an assistant. What could he say? Bufong looked at the black turtle constellation walk. After the Heaven Alps spirit spring water in the walk had all turned blood red, Bufong raised his palm and patted on the black turtle constellation walk. In an instant, the spirit beast claw flew out from the black turtle constellation walk. True energy filled the air, entering the dragon bone kitchen knife, causing the dragon bone kitchen knife to let out a dragon roar. That dragon roar resounded throughout the entire place, causing everyone's hearts to jump. In the next instant, a light flashed. The layer of skin on the spirit beast claw was easily peeled off. The speed of that knife was really too fast. The assistant only saw a golden light flash in front of his eyes, and he realized that the falling chicken claw had already been cleaned up. That white and tender claw even had some elasticity as it bounced, emitting hot steam. "Hurry up and make the chili sauce." Bufong glanced at the dumbfounded assistant, calmly saying. The assistant hurriedly closed his mouth, took out a huge blue and white porcelain pot, and poured the processed chili into it. Then, he carefully opened the crystal jar that Bufong handed over. Once the lid was opened, the assistant smelled a wave of spicy smell, instantly entering his nostrils. What the F***CK? The assistant's nostrils widened, and in an instant, they became a little red. His eyes were bloodshot. This spicy smell was really terrifying. Closing his nostrils, the assistant carefully scooped up a spoonful of the bright red chili sauce, pouring it into the blue and white porcelain pot. Then he poured in the spirit liquid that Bufong had prepared, slowly stirring it. Gurgle. As he stirred, the chili sauce gradually took shape. That bright red spicy sauce made the assistant's heart jump. There was not a single strand of chili floating above the chili sauce. Perhaps because it had been processed, the chili had all settled at the bottom. However, it was precisely this calm chili sauce that made people feel a surging undercurrent. After stirring for a while, the assistant felt that his face was red from the spicy smell, and he was about to spurt out blood. Only then did Bufong leisurely shout, "It's done." When the assistant heard that, he instantly felt as if he had been granted amnesty, and he immediately turned around to hide behind a cloud of hot steam. As for Bufong, he carefully placed the spirit beast claw into the blue and white porcelain pot. In the distance, when Rincho's eyes were like torches, and the kitchen knife in his hand flashed. In the next instant, he fiercely chopped the kitchen knife on the chopping board, looked at Bufong, and spoke with incomparable confidence. "Burning heart-ripping claw done." He stretched out his hand and fiercely clawed into the white porcelain pot. Swish, the chili sauce tumbled, and when Rincho's expression did not change as he pulled out a bright red chicken claw that was emitting thick steam. Chapter 582. When Rincho's spirit beast claw was finished, that bright red spirit beast claw was still emitting heat. Bits of chili powder stuck to it, causing the claw meat to look quite strange. Placing the chicken claw on the white porcelain plate, when Rincho's true energy surged, washing away the chili sauce on his hand. He looked at the burning heart-ripping claw with satisfaction, his heart full of confidence. This time, The burning heart-ripping claw was done quite well. After all, it was a second-grade dish, so it was not hard for him to cook it. Moreover, he believed that the taste of the burning heart-ripping claw this time would definitely be very surprising. "Supreme Sir, please have a taste." One Rincho, who was wearing cotton clothes, was incomparably confident, smiling as he said to the Supreme Blade Tyrant in the distance. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's eyes also flashed with light, coming over with interest. The appearance was very familiar, causing his heart to be quite excited. "What a nostalgic feeling," the Supreme Blade Tyrant said. After saying that, he stretched out his hand, holding the burning heart-ripping claw in his hand. A thick fragrance spread out, causing the Supreme Blade Tyrant to be unable to resist opening his mouth to have a taste. Crunch! With one bite, the crispy spirit beast claw was directly bitten into pieces. The plump claw meat entered his mouth, and under the bright red claw meat was the white and tender meat. The fragrance filled the air, and the oil spread out. This claw meat was very elastic, continuously bouncing in his mouth, causing the Supreme Blade Tyrant to close his eyes to enjoy it. Crunch, crunch. The bones of the spirit beast claw were also cooked until they were tender, not very hard. With one bite, it broke. That kind of delicate taste was indeed intoxicating. "Stop looking. Prepare the steamer basket for me," Bufong said to the assistant who was far away with his mouth open and drooling. That assistant was instantly stunned, turning his head with a face full of doubt. "Prepare the steamer basket for what? The recipe didn't say that." That assistant did not understand. He had also seen the recipe before. Don't try to trick people. That recipe is not complete. Although the taste of the chicken claw, made according to the recipe, is not bad, there will always be some flaws because the taste of the chili sauce did not completely permeate the chicken claw meat. Bufong was quite patient, seriously explaining to that assistant. The assistant still had a face full of confusion. Was it really like that? That one Rincho did not use the steamer basket, but the Supreme Blade Tyrant seemed to be enjoying it. Would it taste bad? I don't think so. So it doesn't matter if I don't use the steamer, right? Forget it. Go chop the firewood and chop all these spiritual materials, Bufong said to his assistant when he saw the disbelief on his face. Firewood. The assistant thought about it and did not refuse. He didn't trust Bufong anymore. Could he really cook something delicious without following the recipe? Furthermore, Bufong had added so much chili sauce. He really didn't know what the taste of the burning heart-ripping claw would be like. He ignored his assistant's suspicious gaze. He didn't want to explain anything. He got out of the steamer and scooped out the spirit beast claw that was rolling in the spicy sauce. The spicy sauce bubbled up, and a strong spicy smell filled the air, spreading throughout the whole place, bringing with it a special fragrance. It was a little spicy. Many people felt their nostrils go numb when they smelled the spicy aroma. They were shocked in their hearts. He set up the steamer and placed the chicken feet that were dripping with oil into the steamer. He covered the steamer with the lid. Bufong prepared to start the last step. The assistant had also finished chopping the spiritual materials. This was a special kind of spirit peachwood. The material had a slight orange color, and when it was burned, it released a fragrant smell. Bufong used his mind to control the black turtle constellation wok, which floated in the air. The heaven and earth obsidian flame spat out, igniting the peach wood. The peach wood emitted a raging flame that burned under the black turtle constellation wok. Not long later, the steamer let out a gurgling sound. Bufong lifted the lid of the steamer, and the steam rose up. The bright red chicken feet lay quietly in the steamer. The meat on the feet seemed to have undergone some extraordinary changes under the white steam. In the distance, many people were attracted by Bufong's actions. Steamer? Everyone had a strange expression on their faces. Why did he use a steamer? There was no steamer step in the recipe. Okay, Bufong actually changed the recipe? After when Rincho recovered from his shock, he sneered coldly. This was a second-grade recipe from the Valley of Gluttony. It was a recipe recorded by a first-grade or even a special-grade chef from the Valley of Gluttony. How could it be something that a young chef could casually alter? The Supreme Blade Tyrant's face also darkened. Bufong changing the steps in the recipe made him very unhappy, because changing the steps in a recipe was equivalent to changing the taste of the burning heart-ripping claw in his heart. To a glutton, this was unforgivable. Bufong naturally did not know what the others were thinking. He narrowed his eyes, looking at the spirit beast claw that was gradually becoming crystal clear in the white steam, and the corner of his mouth instantly curled up. When all the firewood was burned out, the white steam in the wok also dissipated. Only a sparkling chicken claw that seemed to be flowing with light was left lying quietly on the steamer. A faint heat spread. Mala chicken claw done. Bufong looked at the crowd in the distance, calmly saying. Bufong's assistant's face was already pale, because when Bufong finished cooking this dish, he saw the Supreme Blade Tyrant's gloomy face, and he instantly cursed in his heart. In the soul sea space, the Supreme Blade Tyrant was the existence that controlled their life and death. This Bufong actually recklessly changed the recipe, which angered the Supreme Blade Tyrant. If the Supreme Blade Tyrant was enraged and killed them all, then he would really have no place to cry. Alu and Ah Wei's dishes were also completed. The Shura Saintus and Luo Li's burning heart-ripping claw were also completed. However, everyone felt that something was wrong. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's face was gloomy, his eyes deep, as if there was a blade energy circulating within. That blade energy was extremely terrifying, and as it circulated, it seemed as if it was going to cut everything into pieces. Everyone's heart tightened. The Supreme Blade Tyrant swept his gaze across the crowd, then casually waved his hand. In the next instant, every team's burning heart-ripping claw that was completed flew in front of him. Gulp. Other than Bufong and Wen Rinchou, everyone's heart jumped, swallowing a mouthful of saliva, incomparably nervous. Bufong was very calm. That was because he had confidence in his own dish. Wen Rinchou was calm. That was because his dish had already obtained the Supreme Blade Tyrant satisfaction. However, the gaze that Wen Rinchou used to look at Bufong was like looking at a dead person. Changing the recipe without permission, in a valley of gluttony, that person would be dragged to be drowned in a pig cage. He even dared to dig his own grave. This little chef really wasn't afraid of death. Just wait. In a while, the enraged Supreme Blade Tyrant would definitely tear this guy apart. He originally thought that this little chef would become his opponent. Who would have thought that this guy would actually court death? Since he chose to court death, then he did not have the qualifications to be his opponent. Why did you change the recipe I gave you without permission? Who do you think you are? The Supreme Blade Tyrant said coldly. His gaze landed on Bufong's body, causing Bufong to involuntarily furrow his brows, because he felt as if his entire body was being cut by knives. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flashed, taking a step forward, blocking in front of Bufong. The aura on his body burst forth, and the metal armor on his back revolved with a clang. The metal wings on his back spread open, and he instantly entered a battle state. Supreme Blade Tyrant, I already persuaded him. If he wants to change the recipe, it has nothing to do with me. The expert that was assigned to the same team as Bufong instantly revealed fear in his eyes, hurriedly opening his mouth to speak. This recipe is not complete. Can I change it? Also, if I want to change it, I can change it. Do I need your permission? I'm a chef. What are you? Bufong glanced at the Supreme Blade Tyrant, saying expressionlessly, Rumble. Once Bufong's words came out, everyone's expression changed. This little chef actually dared to talk back to the Supreme Blade Tyrant like that. This was the Supreme Blade Tyrant's soul sea space. Could it be that Bufong didn't know about the death of Commander Han previously? Arrogant. This Supreme has roamed the hidden dragon continent for more than 100 years, and the number of experts that have died in this Supreme's hands is uncountable. Things like you, who don't know life from death, I have killed even more. You really aren't afraid of death. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's body instantly released a wave of domineering knife energy, as if there was a shadow of a knife energy appearing behind him. When Rinchou and the rest felt their hearts tremble, it was as if they saw an incomparably powerful expert that roamed the hidden dragon continent. That was the true Supreme Blade Tyrant. I really don't know where your arrogance comes from. You're awesome, but you're already dead. Buffon's expression did not change, calmly saying, "You're already dead." Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. This little chef really dared to say that. This was touching on the Supreme Blade Tyrant's weakness. Even if the Supreme Blade Tyrant was already dead, this was a fact. However, at this moment, everyone was in the Supreme Blade Tyrant's soul sea space, and the remnant soul of the Supreme Blade Tyrant still controlled their life and death. Angering the Supreme Blade Tyrant like this, did this little chef want everyone to die with him? However, out of everyone's expectations, the Supreme Blade Tyrant's aura suddenly retracted, and he indifferently smiled. However, that smile, no matter how you looked at it, was a little terrifying. The Supreme Blade Tyrant stretched out a hand, and with a casual wave, the burning, heart-ripping claw that Luo Li and the Shurasaintis cooked together landed in his hand. As he looked at Buffon, he bit down on the chicken claw, and a bone-chilling, crunching sound rang through the entire kitchen. The spiciness is too weak. The meat is too tough. Not suitable, kill. After the Supreme Blade Tyrant finished speaking, Luo Li and the Shurasaintis' faces instantly became pale. However, the Supreme Blade Tyrant did not make a move. Instead, he grabbed the chicken claw that Lu and Wei cooked together and fiercely bit down. It was still the same bone-chilling, crunching sound. The meat is too tough. The spirit energy in the claw is too much. Not suitable, kill. Hearing that, Lu and Wei's hearts trembled, and their faces revealed fear. The other team's chicken claw was also sentenced to death. Everyone present knew that the Supreme Blade Tyrant was enraged. Was he going to start a massacre? Finally, it was Buffon's chicken claw's turn. The Supreme Blade Tyrant grabbed that chicken claw. Suddenly, his face changed, and the skin on his face trembled. Once it entered his hand, the texture of this chicken claw was a little different. The fragrance drilled into his nose, causing him to narrow his eyes. Buffon calmly looked at him. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's mouth twitched, revealing his sharp teeth. He bit down. Crunch! After biting down on the chicken claw, the meat entered the Supreme Blade Tyrant's mouth. After chewing for a while, his eyes instantly shrank. His nostrils slightly opened, and he started to fiercely blow out hot air. Crunch, crunch! Crunch, crunch! The Supreme Blade Tyrant did not say anything. He continuously chewed in his mouth, and the shock in his eyes became more and more intense. Very quickly, the whole chicken claw was eaten by him, and the Supreme Blade Tyrant's face became red. In the end, after eating the chicken claw, he even licked his fingers, opened his mouth, and fiercely breathed out. The tip of his nose even had beads of sweat. Everyone was dumbfounded. What the hell? What was this Supreme Blade Tyrant doing? Suddenly, he became a foodie again. Why did he finish all of Buffon's chicken claw? When Rincho's heart shrank, it was like this again. His chicken claw was only eaten a few mouthfuls by the Supreme Blade Tyrant, but Buffon's chicken claw was finished. Could it be that he was going to lose again? Finally, the Supreme Blade Tyrant, who had been silent for a long time, opened his mouth. That hoarse voice lingered in the kitchen. Why is it so spicy? Why does it taste so good? Buffon expressionlessly looked at the Supreme Blade Tyrant, and the corner of his mouth twitched. I've said it before. Your recipe has a problem. Recipe has a problem. The Supreme Blade Tyrant suddenly raised his head, and the energy on his body once again froze. A terrifying blade energy gathered behind his back. Even if your chicken claw tastes good, that's not a reason for you to change my recipe. So, your dish is not up to standard. You will also have to die. Boom! The aura spread out, and everyone's expression changed. As expected, Buffon furrowed his brows. The tyrannical blade energy blew over, breaking the velvet rope that tied his hair. His entire head of hair fluttered in the wind. Buffon's eyes stared closely at the Supreme Blade Tyrant, and he said word by word, "Not up to standard? You don't have the right to judge my dish. I've long been unhappy with you." Chapter 583. Shwa shwa shwa. In the dense forest, a slender figure sped through the air. Her speed was extremely fast. Her figure suddenly jumped from the thick tree trunk, and her entire person turned into a stream of light as she shot out. As she moved forward, her head of white hair billowed like a waterfall. In the dense forest, there were countless spirit beasts roaring softly, but they were all cleverly dodged by this person. This person seemed to be very familiar with this area. She nimbly shuttled through the trees with a serious expression. In her hand was a jade talisman, and there was a lustrous light spreading around her body, as if there was an invisible force guiding her forward. This person was Jiangling, who sped in one direction the moment she entered the Heaven's Secret Territory. Her goal in coming to the Heaven's Secret Territory was not simple. Even when the inheritance of the Supreme Blade Tyrant appeared, she still chose to give up. One had to know that the Supreme Blade Tyrant was an ancient expert at the peak of the Divine Soul Realm. The temptation of his inheritance was not something an ordinary person could resist. Suddenly, Jiangling's figure suddenly stopped, and she landed on a piece of flat ground. This was an extremely remote area, and the number of spirit beasts in the surroundings was extremely low. The ground was dry, and the plants were all withered and dead. The air was filled with death energy. Jiangling landed here, and her heart was a little uneasy. This area always gave her a sense of danger, and it made her heart jump. Even with her cultivation that had broken through 4 Supreme Being shackles, she still felt a wave of confusion and fear. However, it seemed that the goal in her heart gave Jiangling courage. She took out a black jade talisman. This was a jade talisman that was carved from black jade. Very few people would use black jade to carve jade talismans. This was because there was a dense death energy within the black jade. This energy would affect the normal operation of the array. Teacher, I finally found it. This is the place you told me about. Jiangling's eyes were filled with excitement. This was because the black jade talisman in her hand was actually flashing with light. Looking at this light, Jiangling unconsciously became excited. Her biggest goal in coming to the Heaven's Secret Territory was to complete the goal that her teacher had set for her. Her teacher told her that this was an opportunity for her. She believed that her teacher would not lie to her. Jiangling forcefully suppressed the excitement in her heart, and she crushed the jade talisman. The black jade talisman collapsed, and the array that was suppressed within instantly spread, enveloping the entire area. The buzzing sound resounded unceasingly. The ground around the array instantly trembled, and the plants began to wither at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye. The black formation was filled with a black aura. The aura surged and churned. Jiangling, who was standing in the center of the array, instantly felt the black gas enveloping her body. The peculiar energy immediately drilled into her body, causing her to feel pain as if she was being pierced by needles. After a long time, Jiang felt that her body was incomparably sore and sweaty. She laid on top of the array, and her entire body was slightly twitching. Suddenly, a tall figure suddenly appeared in front of her, a black shadow covering her body. Jiangling raised her head in a daze. Instantly, a handsome face appeared in front of her eyes. This was an extremely handsome man. He had black hair, black eyes, and skin as white as jade. Anyone who saw him would have a good impression of him. Jiangling was stunned. She had never seen such a handsome man before. The man looked at Jiangling and smiled warmly. That smile seemed to be able to cause the downfall of cities and empires. Jiangling only felt that her heart was about to melt. Are you the one who opened the teleportation array? I haven't left the netherworld for a long time. I miss it a little. Oh, miss, may I ask if you know a black-haired, black-eyed beauty? You guys usually call her the netherworld woman. The man smiled, and his smile was bright. I've been unhappy with you for a long time. Bufang's voice was not loud, but it reverberated in the quiet kitchen, causing everyone to be dumbstruck. Even the Supreme Blade Tyrant himself was a little stunned. What did the little chef say? He had been unhappy with him for a long time? Why did he not like him? Who was he? He was the Supreme Blade Tyrant, a super expert who swept across the Hidden Dragon continent. He killed countless experts with one blade, and he was in existence at the peak of the divine soul realm who dared to kill a divine beast with one blade. Even if it was a disciple of the hidden dragon royal court, they would not dare to say such words to him. How could this little chef in front of him dare to say such words? Little chef, do you know that those who provoked me, the supreme blade tyrant, have already become ghosts under the supreme blade tyrant's blade? The supreme blade tyrant coldly said. The aura on his body became denser and denser, and the terrifying blade energy behind him roared. Bufong's words caused his mind to tremble violently, and the entire soul sea space seemed to be collapsing. The Shura Saintis and the rest felt that the space was unstable, and they could not even stand steadily. This supreme blade tyrant was really angry. When Rincho coldly laughed, he was very calm in his heart. He was sure that the inheritance of the supreme blade tyrant should belong to him. If he could obtain the inheritance of the supreme blade tyrant, he would be able to return to the Valley of Gluttony the next time, and his status would definitely increase by a lot. He might even be able to enter the Valley of Gluttony's kitchen and obtain the opportunity to open a shop there. Originally, this chef had the chance to defeat him. However, he did not cherish it, and must provoke the supreme blade tyrant, since he was seeking death. Naturally, that was for the best. When Rincho took in a deep breath, the tip of his feet lightly tapped on the ground, and his entire body floated up. In the next instant, the entire kitchen space changed, and it became a space filled with blade energy. The entire space was filled with surging blade energy. Everyone felt their skin tighten, as if the blade energy was going to cut their bodies into pieces, causing their hearts to palpitate. Actually, all of the blade energy was aimed at Bufong, and Bufong's pressure was the greatest. However, because of the system, Bufong was naturally immune to pressure. Therefore, the supreme blade tyrant who intended to use pressure to suppress Bufong would be disappointed. Facing the endless true energy, Bufong was still so calm and expressionless. Xiao Bai took a step forward, and he stood in front of Bufong. His metal wings spread open, covering the sky. Even if the enemy was at the peak of the divine soul realm, Xiao Bai did not retreat in the slightest. Bufong indifferently looked at the supreme blade tyrant. A light flashed in his hand, and instantly, a red kitchen knife appeared in his hand. "This is your weapon, right?" Bufong said. "A dead person does not deserve to hold my weapon," the supreme blade tyrant indifferently said. At this moment, he was the peak divine soul realm existence that looked down on the entire continent. The entire soul sea space seemed to have become a blade energy domain. Rip! Countless blade energy swept out and slashed at Bufong. The blade energy turned into a huge, overbearing blade, and the pressure it emitted caused everyone present to feel suffocated. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flashed to the extreme, turning into a gray-white color. The armor on his body started to move, and one array after another condensed on his body. Energy burst forth, and array cannons shot out one after another. Swoosh! Swoosh! The sound of the array cannons tore through the air, smashing towards the blade energy that was slowly slashing down from the sky. A loud explosion resounded, and the sound of the explosion caused a wave of energy. However, it still could not affect the blade energy that was slashing down. It's useless. In this Supreme's soul sea space, this Supreme is God. No one can go against the will of God. The Supreme Blade Tyrant coldly laughed. His body floated up, becoming extremely huge, covering the sky. He was indeed like a ruler that stood tall in the void. Buzz, the red kitchen knife in Bufong's hand, also started to shake violently, as though it was going to break free from Bufong's hand and fly out. Bufong furrowed his brows, letting go of his hand. The kitchen knife instantly whistled, flying out. The light on the kitchen knife shone brightly, and it was bright red. The domineering supreme blade flicked his finger, and in an instant, the red kitchen knife turned around, fiercely slashing towards Bufong. He wanted to completely kill Bufong. Countless people have died under my slaughter god blade. Even divine beasts are stained with blood. You are just a small chef in the divine physique echelon. You should be satisfied. The supreme blade tyrant's voice was deafening. In the distance, the Shura Saintess and the rest did not even dare to breathe loudly. They looked at Bu Fong's calm appearance, and they felt a little admiration. Unfortunately, Bu Fong was definitely going to die. Facing the slaughter god blade, even an expert in the divine soul realm might not be able to block it. How could a mere chef block it? Luoli stared at Bu Fong. He knew that the Shura Tower was on Bu Fong's body, and he needed to take it back. Alu and Ah Wei felt that it was a pity. Actually, they just wanted to defeat Bu Fong fair and square. However, it seemed like there was no chance. When Rincho crossed his arms in front of his chest and raised his head, he looked at Bu Fong with disdain. This reckless chef actually dared to fight against the supreme blade tyrant, who was at the peak of the divine soul realm, as a divine physique echelon who had broken through one of the supreme being's shackles. Even if the supreme blade tyrant had already fallen, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. How could it be challenged by an ant? Die. Go and die. Bu Fong had defeated him twice on the path of cooking, and this caused him to feel a wave of fear. Towards this kind of person with such potential, he had to kill him. Otherwise, if he was discovered by the experts in the Valley of Gluttony, he would become a terrifying opponent. Killing the opponent before he could sprout was the correct way. Looking at the slaughter god blade that was slashing towards him, Bu Fong's eyes flashed, and green smoke curled around his hand. The black dragon bone kitchen knife instantly appeared in his hand. The energy whirlpool in his dantian revolved, and true energy poured into the dragon bone kitchen knife without reservation. In an instant, a dragon's roar resounded, and the image of a golden divine dragon surged behind Bu Fong's back, rushing towards the sky. The dragon bone kitchen knife became bigger, and it shone with a dazzling golden light. Bu Fong carried the dragon bone kitchen knife, expressionlessly staring at the blood-red slaughter god blade that was slashing towards him. He took a deep breath. Overlord 13 blades. First blade, slash. Holding the knife with both hands, Bu Fong's hair fluttered as he fiercely slashed down. Rip! Golden light filled the air, and the blade energy soared into the sky. A ray of golden blade energy surged out from the dragon bone kitchen knife, slashing onto the blood-red slaughter god blade. The slaughter god blade trembled, but its momentum did not decrease. It continued to slash down. It's useless. How can an ant block this sovereign slaughter god blade? Die. The supreme blade tyrant sneered. However, facing the supreme blade tyrant sneer, Bu Fong was still very calm. He carried the dragon bone kitchen knife, took a deep breath, and slashed down again. Second blade, third slash, fourth slash, seventh blade. Beads of sweat appeared on Bu Fong's forehead. He let out a light breath, and the golden blade energy that filled the sky slashed down, transforming into a roaring golden divine dragon. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it charged towards the slaughter god blade. The Overlord 13 blades. Each blade was stronger than the previous one. 7 blades stacked together, slashing the heavens and destroying the earth. Boom! Boom! In front of everyone's stunned gazes, the golden divine dragon and the resplendent red slaughter god blade collided. A crisp cracking sound rang out, as though it came from the depths of hell. Chapter 584. That crisp cracking sound was so clear that it lingered in everyone's ears. At the point of collision, a dazzling light appeared and a violent wave of energy spread out in all directions. The blade energy swept across the area, cutting everything in its path. The huge blade energy in the air ruthlessly smashed down. Xiao Bai's huge body was directly smashed into the ground, bringing with it a loud bang. However, Xiao Bai was unharmed. He immediately flipped himself up from the ground, and there seemed to be a light shining in his ash-gray eyes. The wings on his back suddenly expanded, and they were as sharp as blades. However, everyone's attention was not on Xiao Bai's body. Instead, it was on the collision of the blade energy in the distance. No one would have thought that Bufang would actually release such a terrifying attack. The Slaughter God Blade's red light dimmed. After being struck by the Overlord's seventh blade, it seemed to let out a mournful cry as it directly fell from the sky. Those with sharp eyes looked at the Slaughter God Blade, and all of them sucked in a breath of cold air. That Slaughter God Blade actually broke? A crack appeared from that little chef's slash. Simply too terrifying. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's Slaughter God Blade actually broke? My eyes must be playing tricks on me, right? Impossible. How could that little chef do such a thing? The Shura Saintess and the rest were dumbfounded. They completely did not dare to believe that the incomparably hard Slaughter God Blade, which could be called a divine weapon, could actually be broken by 7 slashes. Although only a small crack appeared, it was already extremely inconceivable to the Slaughter God Blade. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's eyes were cold. His body seemed to have merged with the entire soul sea space, and he was like an incomparably huge god that covered the sky. The Slaughter God Blade breaking was out of the Supreme Blade Tyrant's expectations. At this moment, his mind seemed to tremble for a moment. The Slaughter God Blade accompanied him as he roamed the hidden dragon continent and fought bloody battles with divine beasts. It was incomparably hard and was comparable to a divine weapon. The body of the blade was also forged by a master from the Valley of Gluttony using countless natural treasures. Unless it was a divine weapon from the Valley of Gluttony or a divine weapon from the Hidden Dragon Royal Court, it would be impossible to destroy it. This unknown little chef actually managed to shatter his Slaughter God saber with a kitchen knife that he had gotten from nowhere. How could he not be shocked? However, other than being shocked, the Supreme Blade Tyrant also felt a surge of anger. How dare you break my Slaughter God saber? You're seeking death. A bright light shot out from the Supreme Blade Tyrant's eyes. The entire soul sea space started to fluctuate violently as countless blade energies spread out. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Saber chi tore through the air and swept towards the dim Slaughter God saber in the sky. It continuously entered the Slaughter God saber. The Slaughter God saber also became resplendent and dazzling at a speed visible to the naked eye. The Slaughter God blade had a spirit. After absorbing so much saber chi, it released an oppressive aura that caused everyone's expression to change. They knew that this was the real Slaughter God blade, the awakened Slaughter God blade. It was the Slaughter God blade that could shatter mountains and rivers. That little chef is dead for sure. When Rincho shook his head and said, facing the awakened Slaughter God blade, unless Bu Fong's strength could enter the divine soul realm, he would not be able to block it. Previously, the Slaughter God blade had been dormant for a long time, and the energy within it had dried up. This was because the Supreme Blade Tyrant had been dead for a long time and did not give the Slaughter God blade any nourishment. Now that the Supreme Blade's energy had returned, the Slaughter God blade could once again release a blade wind. Buzz, the blade trembled, and under the Supreme Blade Tyrant's sharp gaze, the Slaughter God blade directly cut through the void. It swayed as it slashed down towards Bufang. The air seemed to become extremely suffocating at this moment. Bufang's expression did not change. He carried the resplendent golden dragon bone kitchen knife on his shoulder and looked at the red Slaughter God blade that was slashing down with a monstrous might. The blade energy blew past, causing his hair to become messy. From the Slaughter God blade, Bufang could even feel a wave of primal anger. It was obvious that this was the work of the Slaughter God blade's spirituality. Everyone did not even dare to breathe loudly as they watched the Slaughter God blade slash down. They knew that it was possible that Bufang was going to die. It would be difficult for the miracle from before to happen again. Some of them even had a look of pity on their faces. This little chef was courting death. With his ability, he even had the chance to obtain the Supreme Blade Tyrant's inheritance. Why did he have to resist? He could obviously obtain the benefits, but he chose to die. Everyone was a little puzzled. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's eyes were cold and emotionless. Even though he had already fallen, his prestige was still not something an ant could violate. Bu Fong stared at the slaughter god blade and took in a deep breath. He held the golden dragon bone kitchen knife with both hands, and his gaze was firm. At that moment, Bu Fong's calm mind suddenly felt a wave of disdain. At that time, he was a little stunned. However, after sensing the source of that wave of disdain, Bu Fong was sure that the wave of disdain actually came from the golden dragon bone kitchen knife on his shoulder. Only then did Bu Fong confirm that the small emotion actually came from the dragon bone kitchen knife on his shoulder. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife also had spirituality? Bu Fong was stunned. This was the first time he realized that his own kitchen knife was actually so magical. System, the golden dragon bone kitchen knife has spirituality? Bu Fong asked the system curiously. The system had never told him that the golden dragon bone kitchen knife had spirituality. He had always thought that this kitchen knife was just an incomparably sharp kitchen knife that could be used conveniently. This was the first time he felt that his kitchen knife had become so big and powerful. The system did not immediately reply him. Instead, it was silent for a while before replying solemnly. The god of cooking sets all have spirituality. However, the host's current level is too low, so he is unable to sense it. This time, the golden dragon bone kitchen knife showed a small emotion because of the provocation of the red kitchen knife. Under normal circumstances, with the host's current strength, he is unable to sense the spirit of the god of cooking set. Bu Fong was expressionless. The god of cooking sets all had spirituality. Did that mean that his black walk also had spirituality? However, his current strength was too weak, so the god of cooking set did not want to communicate with him. Was he being looked down upon by the god of cooking set? Rip! With a slash, the knife energy roared. The vermilion robe on Bu Fong's body glowed with a bright light, counteracting the terrifying sharpness of the knife energy. A streak of red light descended from the sky, slashing straight at Bu Fong. Sucking in a deep breath, Bu Fong waved the golden dragon bone kitchen knife. True energy surged into the knife, causing it to shine with a resplendent golden light. At this moment, the disdainful emotion in the kitchen knife became even more intense. Bu Fong could even hear a disdainful dragon roar. Under everyone's shocked gazes, they sucked in a breath of cold air. Just like that, Bu Fong recklessly brandished his kitchen knife and slashed at the slaughter god blade. The two kitchen knives finally collided without any reservation. Clang! A sharp sound of weapons clashing resounded. The slaughter god blade's radiance was extremely resplendent. However, Bu Fong held the knife with both hands. His face was expressionless, and he looked serious. Terrifying knife energy continuously roared, causing the surroundings around him to shatter. Everyone's hearts trembled. The might of the slaughter god blade was too terrifying. Under that kind of might, that little chef would definitely die, right? However, very quickly, everyone widened their eyes. Their faces were filled with disbelief. That was because the body of Bu Fong, who was about to be swallowed by the red knife energy, shone with a golden radiance. It was as dazzling as a speck of gold in the sand. In the next instant, the golden radiance became denser and denser. Finally, it suppressed the red light. Everyone was in a daze. They felt as though there was a dragon roar resounding in their ears. A resounding sound rang out. With a cracking sound, the slaughter god blade was completely cut into two halves. Specks of red light spread out and were absorbed by the golden dragon bone kitchen knife. Clang! The sky full of knife energy dissipated, and the red light that covered the sky disappeared. It was as though everything had returned to normal in an instant. Only the broken pieces of the slaughter god blade were left on the ground. There was complete silence. Everyone, including the supreme blade tyrant, was silent. It was as though they could not accept this scene. The slaughter god blade was completely cut into pieces. This time, it wasn't just a crack that appeared, it was completely shattered into pieces. Oh my God! When everyone regained their senses, they sucked in a breath of cold air. That fellow, what kind of monster was he? The kitchen knife in his hand. What kind of magical thing was it? It could actually cut the slaughter god blade into pieces. when Rincho was the most shocked. The golden kitchen knife in Bufong's hand made him feel as though he was looking at the top kitchen knives in the Valley of Gluttony. Damn, could this little chef be the illegitimate child of some big shot in the Valley of Gluttony? Huff, 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 Bufong panted heavily. The golden radiance on the golden dragon bone kitchen knife had already dissipated. Bufong could not feel the charm of the golden dragon bone kitchen knife at all. As expected, this kitchen knife just could not stand the arrogant slaughter god blade. The supreme blade tyrant was completely stunned. His aura continuously fluctuated, causing the entire soul sea space to tremble. After a long time, the supreme blade tyrant let out a roar. That was an angry roar that brought with it a heart-wrenching grief. His personal weapon, the slaughter god blade, was actually cut into pieces by someone. The slaughter god blade, which did not break even when fighting against the divine beast, was actually cut into two halves by a little chef. The charm within it completely dissipated. His slaughter god blade was finished. You deserve to die. The supreme blade tyrant was so angry that he went crazy. Everyone's expression changed drastically. The void trembled, and the knife energy condensed. The supreme blade tyrant, who originally covered the sky, shrunk his body once again. However, the light on his body was dazzling, and his aura was majestic. It was as though all the energy was compressed together. Bufong panted. Xiao Bai with his round belly stood in front of Bufong. Everyone knew that this time, Bufong had completely angered the supreme blade tyrant. The supreme blade tyrant's killing intent towards Bufong was unstoppable. Die. The supreme blade tyrant's eyes narrowed. His words were filled with killing intent. His figure seemed to cross the void, and in an instant, he appeared in front of Bufong. Xiao Bai's ash-gray eyes flashed. He raised his fan-like hand, slapping towards the supreme blade tyrant. Boom! A huge force rose up, sending Xiao Bai flying. Xiao Bai's huge figure was like a ball as he was sent flying. The sharp knife energy seemed to become a huge knife that descended from the sky, slashing towards Bufong. Bufong furrowed his brows, feeling a wave of pressure pressing down on his body. With a swoosh, Xiao Bai's figure turned into a ray of gold light, shooting out at high speed, piercing through the knife energy in the void and shattering it. This little fellow, after sleeping for so long, every time he slept, his strength would become stronger. The supreme blade tyrant was incomparably cold as he swept a glance at the mantis shrimp. It's useless. In my soul, see space. This supreme is a god. Anyone who dares to offend a god will die. Bufong gently let out a breath. His gaze was deep. Since it's a god, then I, Bufong, will kill a god today. Bufong said expressionlessly. As his words fell, Xiao Bai's figure suddenly became bigger. In the distance, Xiao Bai also spread his wings. With a clang, the metal wings on his back turned into flying knives, sweeping across the sky. Xiao Bai, who was riding on the gold mantis shrimp, suddenly increased his battle strength. Bufong waved his hand, and a bowl of steaming hot rampage ramen, a small and round vigorous beef meatball, and a shimmering red crazy chili strip floated up into the air. The function dish was out. Gourmet array. Activate. Chapter 585. A bowl of ramen, a meatball, a chili strip. The three dishes emitted an aroma as they floated beside Bufong. They floated in the air, releasing a radiance that was bright and dazzling. Bufong's mental energy surged out. Through the amplification of the black Shura tower on his chest, it instantly became extremely strong, sweeping out like a storm. The three dishes seemed to have a special energy pulling each other, and they were connected to each other. In the next instant, the spiritual energy of the three dishes converged to form the shape of the dishes, floating above Bufong's palm. These three were all functional dishes, and they could be combined to form a gourmet array, providing a strong amplification. Bufong felt that his own mental energy was a little swollen. Controlling the three functional dishes to form a gourmet array, to him, The pressure was not small. However, luckily, with the amplification of Ashura Tower, Bufang was able to successfully control his mental energy. The Shura Tower was indeed worthy of being the divine tool of the ancient Shura city. No wonder the people of the ancient Shura city played tricks again and again just to retrieve the Shura Tower. In the distance, Luo Li and the Shura Saintess' eyes instantly bloomed. They stared at the small black tower on Bufang's neck, slightly dazed. That's the Shura Tower. Luo Li licked his lips, his face a little excited. That's right. Our ancient Shura city's divine tool actually landed in the hands of a little chef, and that chef can actually activate the Shura Tower. It's simply unbelievable. The Saintess was also a little speechless, as she said. Her gaze stared at Bufang. Even with the amplification of Ashura Tower, it was impossible for Bufang to be the Supreme Blade Tyrant's opponent. In the Soul Sea space, the Supreme Blade Tyrant was invincible. That little chef was just struggling, and the final result would not change. If he had to die, he still had to die. Xiaopi became huge, and his appearance became somewhat ferocious. The carapace on his body was incomparably sharp, as if he had just arrived. His eyes were scarlet red, and he spat out bubbles from his mouth. His little legs were sliding on the ground. In the Supreme Blade Tyrant's Soul Sea space, Xiaopi actually succeeded in flying, ignoring the Supreme Blade Tyrant's rules. Xiaobai stood on Xiaopi's back as if he had turned into a shrimp knight. The metal wings on his back flapped rapidly and shot out dense metal flying daggers. The Supreme Blade Tyrant, who had his energy compressed together, became extremely strong. Although this was only his remnant soul, when his battle power exploded out, it was comparable to a normal divine soul realm expert. Especially since this was the Soul Sea space, it increased the Supreme Blade Tyrant's battle power even more. Under normal circumstances, anyone below the Divine Soul Realm would definitely die in front of the Supreme Blade Tyrant. Therefore, Bufang had to die. A puppet and a mantis shrimp couldn't stop it at all. Boom! As expected, it was within everyone's expectations. It was just the first collision, but the combination of Xiao Bai and Xiao Opi was blasted away, and they were forcefully pressed to the ground. Xiaopi's legs were crawling, and he forcefully struggled to get up from the ground. With a roar, a beam of light actually shot out from his mouth. Xiao Bai's eyes flashed, and the array on his body surged as he continuously shot out array cannons. One after another, dazzling array cannons bombarded the Supreme Blade Tyrant. However, the Supreme Blade Tyrant was not afraid at all. A pure white blade energy circled around his body, and its speed was incomparably fast. Every time it slashed down, it would block Xiaopi and Xiao Bai's attacks. Although the explosions were unceasing, they were unable to affect the Supreme Blade Tyrant in the slightest. The Supreme Blade Tyrant stood proudly in the air. Raising his hand, he casually waved it, and the blade energy slashed down. Even the air seemed to be torn apart. Xiao Bai and Xiaopi were once again blasted to the ground. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's ice-cold eyes raised up, landing on Bufang's body. This is the capital. You have to be so savage with me? Too weak, the Supreme Blade Tyrant said indifferently. The gaze he used to look at Bufang was as if he was looking at a dead person. Bufang let out a deep breath. Above his palm, 3 streaks of dense spiritual energy floated, and the spiritual energy continuously turned into ramen, beef meatballs, spicy strips, and so on. He did not care about the Supreme Blade Tyrant's words. Bufang raised his hand, and with a flick of his finger, instantly, the array floated out in an instant, enveloping Xiaopi and Xiao Bai's bodies. What kind of technique is this? Many people were a little confused. When Rinchou was also slightly dumbfounded. Even if he walked out of the Valley of Gluttony, he still could not see through Bufang's actions. Was that guy using food to set up an array? How could this be possible? The spiritual energy between the food was incomparably violent, and it was completely unable to connect. How could he set up an array? However, no matter how much when Rinchou doubted it, what Bufang flicked out with his finger was precisely an array. The amplification provided by the array caused Xiao Bai and Xiaopi to explode from the ground in an instant, and on their bodies there was a sparkling brilliance. Xiaopi's eyeballs instantly became round, as if they were thrown into spicy sauce. They became bright red, and they shot out energetically, spitting out destructive beams from their mouths. The armor on Xiao Bai's body let out a clanging sound, and on his arm, a large machete actually formed. The large machete was sharp, and the body of the blade emitted a cold light. Jumping on Xiaopi's back, Xiao Bai directly slashed towards the Supreme Blade Tyrant. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's gaze was cold, and he opened both of his hands. Instantly, countless blade energy gathered from the Soul Sea space, smashing onto Xiao Bai's body, causing Xiao Bai to be smashed into all sorts of distortions in the air. In the end, he landed on the ground with a loud bang, giving off a cloud of green smoke. Bu Fong stood in the distance. With a thought, the light from the gourmet array shone down, and that Xiao Bai once again stood up energetically, waving the large machete as he charged towards the Supreme Blade Tyrant. Luo Li's gaze stared at Bu Fong in the distance. He looked at the pitch-black small tower that floated above Bu Fong's neck, and his breathing gradually became heavier. The Shura Saintess looked at Luo Li with a puzzled expression. "What's wrong with you?" The corner of Luo Li's mouth drew back, and he pointed at Bu Fong in the distance, saying, "If we make a move now and snatch that Shura tower back, how about it?" When the Shura Saintess heard this, she instantly rolled her eyes. "Are you stupid? Bu Fong is currently fighting with the Supreme Blade Tyrant. He needs a Shura tower. Moreover, even if you and I snatch the Shura tower, we won't be able to bring it out with us. Once we snatch the Shura tower, we'll activate the Shura Emperor's sword energy at the same time. Once we tear a hole in the Soul Sea, won't we be able to escape?" Luo Li said. "You're confident that the Shura Emperor's sword energy will definitely be able to tear that Soul Sea apart? What if it can't?" The Shura Saintess countered. Luo Li's eyes darkened. "If there's no what if, do you really think that this chef can defeat the Supreme Blade Tyrant? In the end, it'll be hard for him to escape death. While he can deal with the Supreme Blade Tyrant, we'll quickly take the chance to escape. If we don't escape now, are we going to stay here and wait for death?" The Shura Saintess froze, and she suddenly became silent. She felt that what Luo Li said made sense. However, the Shura Saintess still wanted to say something. Luo Li had already made his move. Under everyone's astonished gazes, Luo Li's figure actually turned into an arrow as he shot toward Bu Fong at a rapid speed. What did he want to do? Many people were confused. However, very quickly, there were people who reacted and secretly cursed at how despicable he was. He actually launched a sneak attack at this moment. The people from the ancient Shura city were really shameless to the extreme. Luo Li did not care, and a crazed and greedy expression appeared on his face. He stared at the small tower floating on Bu Fong's neck, and his eyes were round and bloodshot. His speed became faster and faster, and the 5 supreme shackles behind him swayed. Blood-colored sword energy emanated from his body and shot toward Bu Fong, who was standing in the distance, isolated and helpless. Xiaopi and Xiao Bai were currently fighting against the Supreme Blade Tyrant, so they had no way of escaping to protect Bu Fong. This was also the opportunity that Luo Li found. At this moment, Bu Fong's defense was at its weakest. Luo Li's hand shot out, and his other hand held a blood-colored jade talisman. His palms were sweaty. He knew that he only had one chance. Finally, Bu Fong also noticed Luo Li, who was rushing towards him. Bu Fong was slightly stunned, as if he did not expect that Luo Li would actually attack him at this moment. When he came back to his senses, Luo Li had already rushed in front of him. Luo Li's face was full of malevolence. True energy burst forth, and he raised his palm. His entire palm seemed to have become a blood-colored long sword, slashing towards Bu Fong's neck. And his target was the Shura Tower. "I'm about to get the Shura Tower. As long as I get the Shura Tower, My position in the ancient Shura city will rise again. I can even become the Shura sovereign's confidant. Luo Li's eyes widened, and his mouth opened, revealing a trace of excitement and madness. The greed in his eyes made Bufang's heart turn cold, and his heart palpitated. Rip! The terrifying and sharp sword energy slashed down, causing Bufang to feel a slight stab of pain on his skin. He stared fixedly at the blood-colored talisman that Luo Li was thrusting towards him, and his gaze became solemn. Closer, closer and closer. Luo Li was so excited that his heart almost jumped out of his chest. In his eyes, there was only the Shura Tower. For the Shura Tower. Little chef, go and die. Roar. With an explosive roar, the sword energy burst forth once again. The blood-colored sword energy became thicker, and its might became even more terrifying. It slashed towards Bufang's head. The terrifying danger caused Bufang's heart to shrink. In the next instant, the vermilion robe on his body suddenly emitted a radiance, and it was as if there was a faint phoenix cry lingering in his ears. Around Bufang's body, bits and pieces of fiery red feathers floated down. These feathers circled around Bufang's body, as if they had turned into a defensive barrier. That unstoppable sword caused the sky to fill with feathers, and it directly slashed at Bufang's shoulder. Luo Li's pupils shrank, and his heart trembled. He raised his head in disbelief, looking at Bufang. How is this possible? Luo Li roared, and his face was filled with fear. His all-out attack actually couldn't even pierce through the skin of this little chef in front of him. Bufang expressionlessly looked at Luo Li. He stretched out his hand, grabbed the hilt of the blood-colored sword, and slowly raised it up. Green smoke curled around his other hand, and a black wok whizzed out, which was held in Bufang's hand. Don't stop, continue stabbing, continue stabbing. Bufang indifferently said. After saying that, the black turtle constellation wok whizzed down, ruthlessly smashing towards Luo Li's head. Chapter 586. Cloud Mist Restaurant. Yu's long, fair legs were bare as she floated in the store. Her long, pitch-black hair floated in the air, twining around her like ribbons. All of a sudden, her long eyelashes trembled, and her tightly shut eyes opened. As if she had sensed something, a trace of doubt appeared on her ice-cold face. The big black dog, who was lying in front of the path understanding tree, was snoring away. Every time it breathed, a peculiar energy would seep out and be absorbed by the path understanding tree. The branches of the path understanding tree swayed, and it seemed to sprinkle down a star-like radiance. Lord Go wrinkled his doggy nose, yawned, and opened his eyes. Girl, there seems to be a familiar aura. That aura should be coming for you, Lord Go said lazily, and his magnetic voice reverberated in the air. Yu's gaze turned to Lord Go, and she nodded. In the secret realm, you said. Lord Go's doggy mouth instantly drew back. In the secret realm? What a coincidence. Isn't that brat Bufang also in the secret realm? Do you think that guy will go find Bufang? After all, that guy should be able to sense the aura on Bufang's body, which is related to you. Lord Go's words stunned you, and she became silent. After a while, you opened her mouth. Then I'll go find Bufang in the secret realm. I can't let that guy hurt Bufang. I still want to continue eating dragon blood rice. After you finished speaking, her mind moved, and the netherworld ship, which had quietly landed in front of the path understanding tree, started to sway. In the next instant, it floated up and fiercely hit the air, tearing a hole in it. Yu's small feet tapped the air, and her graceful figure instantly floated up, landing on the netherworld ship. With a swoosh, the netherworld ship directly entered the void and disappeared. The Lord Go looked at the empty netherworld ship and yawned. Then, he continued to lie down to sleep while muttering to himself, "This girl only thinks about her dragon blood rice." The Lord Go's sweet and sour ribs cannot be lost. Hades stared from afar, flapping its wings and brushing off a few feathers. The sudden disappearance of the underworld ship made it a little dumbfounded, as if it was beyond its intelligence. Luo Li's eyes were filled with madness. His move was beyond everyone's expectations. The Shura Saintess had a complicated expression on her face as she watched Luo Li make his move from afar. After when Rincho recovered from his initial shock, he regained his cold smile. Being able to watch Bufang die was not a bad choice. Lu, Wei, and the other survivors all felt a little ashamed. This Luo Li's cultivation was a waste, and he actually did such a disgusting thing like sneak attacks. When Bufang was using all his strength to fight against the Supreme Blade Tyrant, he actually encountered Luo Li's sneak attack. This was simply a disaster. Originally, fighting against the Supreme Blade Tyrant was already so tiring. Facing the sneak attack of an expert at the peak of the divine physique echelon who had broken through 5 Supreme Being shackles, how could Bufang withstand it? At this moment, Bufang seemed to have fallen into a hopeless situation. However, only Luo Li, who had personally experienced everything, knew how afraid he was in his heart. His sure kill sword was something that even an expert at the peak of the divine physique echelon of the same realm would not be able to withstand, let alone an ant who had just entered the divine physique echelon. However, the truth was that his sure kill sword could not even break through the defense of Bufang's clothes. The blood sword was held by Bufang. Bufang's eyes were cold as he stared at Luo Li. The black turtle constellation wok appeared in his hand, whistling as it smashed down. Luo Li, who was dumbstruck like a wooden chicken, flew into a rage out of humiliation. He raised his palm and smashed it towards the black turtle constellation wok. A mere wok was directly sent flying. However, only a loud bang could be heard. Luo Li felt as if his palm had smashed onto an incomparably hard boulder. That boulder was like a small mountain, and it was difficult to move it. Bang! The black turtle constellation wok ruthlessly smashed onto Luo Li's head, causing the latter to be somewhat dumbfounded. Luo Li covered his head and squatted on the ground. The vermilion robe on Bufang's body shone brilliantly, and the feathers of the vermilion robe fluttered about. The powerful defense of 5 seconds of invincibility allowed Bufang to remain unscathed under Luo Li's sneak attack. Perhaps this was something that Luo Li did not expect. Bufang was also a little angry in his heart. He never would have thought that this Luo Li would actually launch a sneak attack, causing him to be in a slightly sorry state. The 2 smashes from the wok had made Luo Li a little dumbfounded. Bufang didn't have any intention of stopping. He raised the wok and smashed it again and again. I said, "Don't ever stop." You didn't believe me. Do you believe me now? Bufang smashed the black wok as he calmly said. Everyone was speechless, feeling sorry for Luo Li. Boom. The energy on Luo Li's body surged, and his eyes turned red. He was a little dumbfounded. His head was bleeding. However, his heart was like a sea of fire, and his anger surged. Rumble. A loud bang resounded. Xiao Bai and Xiao Pi's figures fell from the sky, smashing hard on the ground. They were flung far away. The light that enveloped Xiao Pi and Xiao Bai's bodies dissipated. Xiao Pi's huge figure also became much smaller. She spat out bubbles, and her small eyes rolled around. Other than this prawn and the iron puppet, what other tricks do you have? A deafening voice resounded. In the void of the Soul Sea, the Supreme Blade Tyrant's figure stood proudly. In the Soul Sea space, the Strong One was still the Supreme Blade Tyrant. Luo Li laughed crazily. His head was full of blood. Although he was unexpectedly smashed by Bufang, he was, after all, an existence at the peak of the divine physique echelon. His physical body was incomparably strong. He only stared crazily at Bufang, laughing crazily. Bufang solemnly turned his head to look at the Supreme Blade Tyrant. Xiao Pi and Xiao Bai had both returned to his side. Xiao Bai's eyes twinkled. The energy in his body rumbled, and he planned to attack again. It's useless. In this Supreme's Soul Sea space, this Supreme is God. No one can come and save you. Just obediently feel the aura of death. The Supreme Blade Tyrant waved his palm. blade energy filled the air, smashing Xiao Bai onto the ground once again. In the soul sea space, he, the supreme blade tyrant, was indeed the controller. The soul sea was like a domain. No one could come and save Bufang. Feeling the killing intent from the supreme blade tyrant's body, everyone sucked in a deep breath. Everyone took a deep breath. They knew that this time, Bufang would not be able to escape death. In the end, his struggle was still unable to resist the tyranny of the supreme blade tyrant. The blade energy that filled the sky gathered, turning into a huge blade that covered the sky and covered the sun. That huge blade was as white as jade. Carrying a terrifying pressure, it slowly chopped down towards Bufang. Rip! Bufang narrowed his eyes. Xiao Bai blocked in front of him. However, at this moment, the space beside Bufang's body suddenly trembled. A white palm stretched out from the void, slowly tearing a gap. Pulling the gap to the two sides, a blurry figure appeared from the gap, slowly walking out. This figure just happened to appear below the position where the blade energy chopped down. Everyone was a little dumbfounded by the sudden appearance of the figure. Just as that figure walked out of the torn space, he suddenly turned his head. Feeling the blade energy that was chopping down, he was slightly stunned. In the next instant, he raised his white palm, flicking his finger. Ding! It was as if the space had frozen. That unparalleled, world-destroying blade energy seemed to be frozen in ice, stiffening in midair. The figure's gaze sized up this blade energy suspiciously, letting out a low sneer. Poochie. In the next instant, with a flick of his finger, the entire blade energy was like broken glass, shattering into pieces. The blade energy dissipated. Incomparably tyrannical, world-destroying blade dispersed just like that. Everyone was dumbfounded. Even Bufang was a little confused and speechless. The supreme blade tyrant felt a burning pain on his face, just as he finished saying that no one could step into his soul sea space to save Bufang. In the next instant, a figure appeared, flicking his finger and dispersing his blade energy. Saving Bufang from a situation of certain death. What face-slapping! Did he have to be so professional? Oh, this little blade energy is not bad, but it's a pity it's a little lacking. That figure smiled warmly, his voice full of magnetism, as if there was a hint of temptation. In the next instant, smoke and dust filled the air, and that figure gradually became clear. Hiss, hiss, hiss! However, when everyone saw the figure's face clearly, they sucked in a breath of cold air. Because what appeared in front of them was simply a perfect man, handsome and tall, incomparably handsome. It was not the kind of flirtatious handsomeness, but the kind of true masculinity and handsomeness. He wore a white robe, flawless and flawless. The strong wind blew, blowing the man's jet-black hair, causing it to flutter. The man turned his head to look at Bufang, his face carrying a smile, causing people to be mesmerized. "Who are you?" The supreme blade tyrant's eyes narrowed as he coldly asked. The man still had a smile on his face, turning his head to look at the supreme blade tyrant. Looking at the blurry figure of the supreme blade tyrant, he indifferently smiled. A remnant soul? Really mischievous. In the future, follow me by my side. It's quite rare to see a remnant soul with a soul sea in the netherworld, the man said with a smile. He did not put the supreme blade tyrant in his eyes at all. After saying that, he continued to look at Bufang, his gaze dark and deep. "Hello. I feel a familiar aura from your body. I think you should have met a beautiful woman with black hair and black eyes, right? You guys usually call her the Netherworld woman," the man said. Bufang furrowed his brows, looking at the man in front of him who was a little too handsome, the corner of his mouth twitching. Towards men who were more handsome than him, Bufang did not have any good impressions, especially this person, who was especially flashy. However, the man's words made Bufang's heart slightly alert. "Netherworld woman? I don't know her. Also, who are you?" Bufang asked expressionlessly. Hiss. In the man's eyes, there was a faint black aura surrounding Bufang's body. That black aura was the aura of the curse. And the aura of the curse Only the Netherworld woman in the secret realm had it. So mischievous, but the way you lie is very cute. The handsome man's eyes narrowed, as if a flower was blooming. Your question is very interesting. Who am I? I am the person who banished the Netherworld woman. People usually call me the Lord of the Netherworld, Hades. Chapter 587. When the man said those words, his gaze was extremely deep. His handsome face was slightly raised, presenting a tricky angle. The melancholy on his face was displayed to the fullest. He was very satisfied with his current state. That was the feeling of a lonely expert. However, Bufong looked at this man as if he was looking at an idiot. The Hades who banished the Netherworld woman? So this showy man in front of him was the one who threw you into the secret territory to starve? Are you surprised? Don't worry, I won't hurt you. The condition is that you bring me to the Netherworld woman. Her exile period is not ended, so she can't leave the secret territory so easily, Hades said with a light smile. In the distance, the supreme blade tyrant, who was floating in the air, felt a little confused. This showy man who suddenly appeared, after destroying his blade energy with a finger, he actually said that he wanted to take him in as a follower. Damn it, this was the first time the Supreme Blade Tyrant had met such a showy person. When he, the Supreme Blade Tyrant, was still alive, he was someone who dared to raise the Slaughter God Blade and slash at divine beasts. Even though he was dead now, he was not someone that could be easily subdued by any Tom, Dick, or Harry, the Lord of the Netherworld. Everyone called him Hades. Damn Hades, did he really think that he, the Supreme Blade Tyrant, was uneducated? It was impossible for the Lord of the Netherworld to leave the Netherworld. So how could he appear in the Heaven's secret territory? This pretentiousness was not even a little more fresh and refined. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's face was like a dog's at that moment. Seeing that the man was ignoring him, the anger in his heart surged. Even though he was a remnant soul, he was a remnant soul with dignity. The Shura Saintis and when Rincho stared at the sudden change in the scene with their mouths agape. This handsome man who suddenly appeared attracted the attention of everyone present. They naturally heard the man's words. Hades? The two of them were shocked. As a traveler of the Valley of Gluttony, when Rincho had naturally read the ancient records of the Valley of Gluttony, he was no stranger to the name Hades. Hades, also known as the Lord of the Netherworld, was an old monster who had lived for many years. His power was unfathomable, and he controlled the entire Netherworld. The Netherworld was a mysterious area. It was said that there were countless experts in that area. There were only a few records about the Netherworld in the Hidden Dragon Continent. This handsome man in front of her actually called himself Hell King, an old monster that had lived for countless years. This was simply putting his life on the line. In my soul sea space, there are actually so many people who dare to be so impudent. Do you really think that I, the Supreme Blade Tyrant, am someone you can bully so easily? In the void, the roar of the Supreme Blade Tyrant could be heard. His body shone brilliantly as he pushed his energy to the limit. He was truly enraged. The man's words deeply provoked him and made him feel humiliated. Buzz, the Supreme Blade Tyrant's figure disappeared in an instant. In the next instant, he suddenly appeared in front of the handsome man. Countless blade energy spread out from his back, as though it was going to mince everything. Die. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's eyes widened in anger as he roared. A fist sweeping up countless blade energy, smashing down. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The energy of the entire soul sea space was drawn out. This Supreme Blade Tyrant was really using all his strength. This kind of power, even a true divine soul realm expert would not be able to withstand it. Boom! A huge explosion resounded, and the terrifying blade energy spread out in all directions. The entire soul sea space became dark at this moment. It was obvious that this attack made the Supreme Blade Tyrant almost draw out the energy of the soul sea. However, after a long time, A wave of light shone from the place where the explosion occurred. In the next instant, the light shone, and everyone could clearly see the scene there. Everyone's eyes slowly shrank, and a dazed expression appeared on their faces. Their mouths were wide open. Unbelievable! That handsome man was not injured at all. That man used a white and slender finger to block the Supreme Blade Tyrant's fist. It was as light as the wind and clouds, and a smile still hung on his face. Simply terrifying. At this moment, the Supreme Blade Tyrant's heart was only left in a daze, because only he was clear about the terrifying scene that happened within the huge explosion just now. That finger, unstoppable, broke through all of his blade energy, landing on his fist. Countless streams of saber chi bombarded the man's body, but they couldn't even tear through the man's clothes. This man who dared to call himself Hades. Exactly what kind of existence was he? Hades narrowed his eyes, and on his handsome face, a gentle smile appeared. Naughty. It's not easy for a remnant soul to remain in the soul sea. The energy of the soul sea is actually wasted like this. I told you to obediently follow me, but you still dared to make a move against me. You have to be punished, the man said with a smile. However, the Supreme Blade Tyrant's entire body was cold. Naughty. Naughty your sister. That man's smile, in the eyes of the Supreme Blade Tyrant, was like a nightmare. In the next instant, the man's other hand waved, and instantly, a pitch-black chain floated up, wrapping around the Supreme Blade Tyrant. This thing is called the Soul Binding Chain. In the Netherworld, it is specially used to bind the remnant souls that have gathered from the various continents. Oh, I rarely use it. Don't worry, it shouldn't be too painful, the man said with a smile. However, just as his words landed, the black chain locked onto the Supreme Blade Tyrant's body. It was as if there was lightning bursting out from the Supreme Blade Tyrant's body. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's eyes became blood red, and he let out a miserable howl that made everyone's hair stand on end. Liar. Didn't he say that it wouldn't hurt? The Supreme Blade Tyrant really wanted to use a mouthful of blade energy to kill this man. The man seemed to be a little embarrassed. Maybe the way I opened it is wrong. Just bear with it for a while. Was this person a clown that the black dog invited? Bufong looked at the handsome man who had an awkward face as he touched his head, and he could not help but be a little speechless. The man locked onto the Supreme Blade Tyrant, and with one hand, he formed a seal. In the next instant, the Supreme Blade Tyrant's remnant soul turned into a ray of light, and it entered the man's hand. The miserable howl disappeared. This way, it's much quieter, the man said. In the distance, the Shura Saintess, when Rincho, and the rest were all dumbstruck. Oh, it's your turn. Shouldn't you tell me where the Netherworld woman is? Don't be naughty, Hades said. Rumble. Because the Supreme Blade Tyrant's remnant soul was absorbed, the entire soul sea space lost its backbone, and it started to collapse. Turbulent energy was being released, and it seemed as if it was going to explode. The Shura Saintess and the rest's faces instantly turned pale. Once this energy exploded, how could they survive? That was the soul sea of an expert at the peak of the divine soul realm. If it exploded, let alone them, even experts at the divine soul realm would be afraid. When Rincho's heart was in pain, he had not received the inheritance of the Supreme Blade Tyrant. Where was the promised inheritance? How did it disappear just like that? Bufong furrowed his brows, and he turned his head to look at his surroundings. Hades also raised his head, and his gaze was deep. What pity this soul sea space collapsed just like that. Forget it. Finding the Netherworld woman is more important. Follow me out. The man said indifferently, and he casually waved his hand. A pitch-black light gushed out from his hand. In the next instant, it enveloped everyone in the soul sea space. Buzz. Everyone felt their eyes blur, and when they regained their senses, they realized that they had already appeared on flat ground. The sun was shining brightly in the sky, and the surrounding trees were lush. Did they return to the heavens' secret territory? Suddenly, everyone's hairs stood on end, and they raised their heads to look in a direction in the sky. There, a pitch-black wooden ship swayed from afar. and it was neither fast nor slow. A terrifying aura spread out from the netherworld ship. At the bow of the wooden ship, a graceful figure stood. Her black dress fluttered in the wind as the black wooden ship moved. Yu's eyes had completely turned pitch black, and her long black hair that reached her waist swayed in the wind. Her white skin was like jade, emitting a luster. Netherworld woman. The Shura Saintess and the rest were stunned, and they sucked in a deep breath. Bu Fong was also stunned, and he looked at Yu, who was standing on the netherworld ship, with a puzzled expression. The handsome man's lips curled into a smile, and he looked in the direction of the netherworld ship with a doting gaze. Under the gaze of tens of thousands of people, the netherworld ship stopped in the sky above them. "Oh, this time, I don't need you to tell me." The netherworld woman directly appeared, which saves me a lot of trouble. Hades smiled. "Old man, let him go." You stood barefooted on the deck of the netherworld ship, and she looked down at the handsome man. Her pitch-black eyes turned and landed on Bu Fong's body, and she pointed at Bu Fong coldly. Bu Fong was stunned. Hades was also stunned. In the next instant, the corners of Hades's mouth curled up, and he said, "Naughty girl, you've really learned bad things." After Hades finished speaking, he took a step forward, and he appeared on the netherworld ship as if he had teleported. The moment his foot landed on the netherworld ship, the ship seemed to be unable to bear the weight, and it fell with a loud bang, smashing into the ground. You expressionlessly looked at Hades. Girl, your complexion has become quite good. Your vitality is quite vigorous, and it seems like you've been living a good life recently." Hades was surprised, and he looked at Yu's expressionless face as he said this. "Old man, how can you leave the netherworld?" The netherworld woman stared at Hades, and she asked, enunciating every word. "Naughty, don't call me old. Have you ever seen an old man as handsome as me? I'm Hades. Isn't it easy for me to leave the netherworld?" Hades said. You calmly looked at him, and she said, "You're really as shameless as what Lord Go said." Hades was stunned, and he said, "Lord Go? What Lord Go?" Bu Fong looked at the two of them chatting, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He looked at you, and he couldn't understand why you were here. Moreover, you and Hades's meeting seemed to be different from what he had imagined. Wasn't Hades here to capture you and bring her back to suffer? You are all the spicy strips sold out. Bu Fong thought for a moment, and he decided to ask an important question. Yu's body trembled, and her pitch-black eyes focused. She turned her head to look at Bu Fong, and she solemnly nodded her head. All sold out. After getting Yu's confirmation, Bu Fong was very satisfied. "Then you guys can continue chatting. I still have something to do," Bu Fong said. In the next moment, Bu Fong patted Xiao Bai's plump belly, and he turned around, intending to leave. Since Hades wasn't here to cause trouble, he was in a hurry to find the true dragon fruit. He needed to complete the system's mission first, and he could only return to his business after completing it. When the Shura Saintess and the others saw this scene, they quietly retreated into the distance. Hades didn't really care about these things. At this moment, what he cared about was the Lord Go that the netherworld woman mentioned. Oh, and the spicy strip. He didn't know what the spicy strip was, but he felt that it was awesome. There was also the Lord Go. He felt that the Lord Go that the netherworld woman mentioned was an extraordinary existence. If a netherworld woman called him Lord Go, he must be really awesome. Didn't you see how she called him old man? Wait a minute. Hades suddenly froze. The Lord Go, the Lord dog that the netherworld woman was talking about. Could it be that shameless dog? Chapter 588. Xiaobai blindly followed behind Bu Fong. The shadow of a human and a puppet stretched out under the sunlight. Bu Fong wanted to find the true dragon fruit. Only by finding the true dragon fruit would the system's mission be considered completed. Thus, Bu Fong was too lazy to care about Hades and you. From the way Hades treated you, he should be very friendly. Since he was friendly, there was no need for him to get involved. He just had to do his own thing. However, Bu Fong still had some doubts in his heart. According to common sense, An existence like Hades should be high and mighty. Why would he appear here? What was the reason for Hades to appear here? After hearing Yu's words, Hades's face became extremely solemn. He stared at you seriously and said, "Tell me, the dog you mentioned, is it really that shameless mangy dog?" Nethery was slightly taken aback. What shameless mangy dog? Although the Lord Go was a little fatter and a little lazy, he still had his principles. There shouldn't be any relationship between him and a mangy dog, right? Too lazy to care about Hades, you saw that Bu Fong's figure was actually getting further and further away. Gradually, she became anxious. Thus, you did not reply to Hades's words. She controlled the Netherworld ship and chased after Bu Fong. The Shura Saintess and the others had already fled in a sorry state. In the secret realm, the Netherworld woman's battle prowess was definitely not something they could contend against. In the outside world, the Shura Saintess could be evenly matched with the Netherworld woman. That was because the Netherworld woman had a curse on her body. Her cultivation was less than a tenth of her original strength, and it was difficult for her to use it. However, in the secret realm, she was as strong as the supreme blade tyrant in the Soul Sea space. One Rincho, who was dressed in cloth, narrowed his eyes as he watched the Netherworld ship break through the sky. Hades and the Netherworld woman, who were on the Netherworld ship, were deeply reflected in his eyes. The Netherworld woman and a man who calls himself Hades. Could he really be related to the Netherworld? When Rincho took a deep breath, suddenly, the corners of his mouth curled up, revealing a meaningful smile. It's good that the Hidden Dragon Royal Court cares a lot about the Netherworld. I think they will be very interested in such an important piece of news. When Rincho looked at Bu Fong's gradually disappearing figure, a creepy smile hung on his face as he gradually disappeared into the darkness. You haven't answered my question. Hades felt that the Netherworld woman's wings had grown strong. She didn't even answer his question, which made him feel somewhat sad. Although the Netherworld woman wasn't very respectful to him in the past, she would at least answer his questions. But now, she even knew how to roll her eyes at him. No matter what, he was the lord of the Netherworld, Hades' era. In the Netherworld, he was the supreme existence. You've definitely been led astray by that mangy dog. You become mischievous, Hades said with certainty. You rolled her eyes. She was too lazy to care about Hades, who was nagging at the side. The Netherworld ship whizzed through the Heaven's secret territory. Soon, it saw the figures of Bu Fong and Xiao Bai. Bringing along a gust of wind, the Netherworld ship descended. The red and white vermilion robe on Bu Fong's body fluttered under the howling wind. He raised his head, and the wind messed up his hair. Yu's tall figure jumped down from the Netherworld ship, floating beside Bu Fong. Bu Fong was slightly stunned, looking at you in confusion. What's wrong? Nethery's long black hair fell to her waist, and her black dress fluttered in the wind, showing off her tall and slender figure. Her pitch-black eyes looked straight at Bu Fong. Hades' era was lying on the Netherworld ship. He stretched out his head, looking at you with a face full of gossip. This posture, could it be that something ambiguous was about to happen? Oh my God, the Netherworld woman had really learned bad things from that mangy dog. As Hades, he should go and stop him. But why was there a faint sense of anticipation in his heart? Hades blinked his eyes. Yu's long eyelashes trembled. Her sparkling feet touched the ground, and she stood in front of Bu Fong. Her red lips opened slightly as she said, Bu Fong, I'm hungry. Oh. Bu Fong nodded his head in understanding. Wait for me to go back. I'll make you dragon blood rice. After saying that, Bu Fong turned around, intending to continue walking. I want to eat it now. Yu's figure flickered, and she appeared in front of Bu Fong like a ghost. Bu Fong furrowed his brows. Did you come all the way from the restaurant to the secret realm just to find me to cook dragon blood rice? Yu nodded her head expressionlessly. Bu Fong curled his lips. This gluttonous Netherworld woman. Suddenly, Bu Fong seemed to have thought of something. He looked at you suspiciously and asked, Did you really sell all of the spicy strips? Yu was taken aback, but she nodded her head solemnly. Bu Fong couldn't help but let go of the doubts in his heart when he saw the confident look on his face. Fine, Follow me for now. Wait until I find the true dragon fruit. Then I'll cook dragon blood rice for you. Bufong raised his hand and patted the netherworld woman's head. After saying that, he waved his hand, and a red, spicy strip appeared. The spicy aroma of the spicy strip permeated the air. Oh, take a spicy strip to satisfy your craving. You received the spicy strip from Bufong's hand with a dumbfounded expression. When she looked at the spicy strip, her complexion darkened. It was the spicy strip again. She had already eaten enough of it. She really missed the taste of dragon blood rice. What's this? Hades asked curiously. He had already appeared beside you. He clasped his hands behind his back and stuck his head out. He stared at the spicy strip in Yu's hand curiously. It's Bufong's dish, the spicy strip, Yu said as she glanced at Hades. This thing? It's food? I can smell an abyssal aura from it. Hades's eyes lit up. When the netherworld woman saw Hades's expression, she handed the spicy strip to him and said, "Eat it." A gentle smile appeared on the Nether King's handsome face. Not bad. The netherworld woman knew how to show filial respect to the Nether King. It seemed like the influence of that mangy dog on the netherworld woman wasn't as big as he had imagined. After stuffing the spicy strip into Hades's hand, Yu strode forward and chased after Bufong. The smile on Hades's face gradually disappeared. His nostrils widened as he moved closer to the spicy strip and sniffed it. A fiery aroma instantly entered his nostrils, and all the pores on his body slightly widened. It was as though dense essence energy was gushing out of his body. It really is the abyssal aura. Although it isn't very dense, it is still incredible. I can actually sense the abyssal aura in the hidden dragon continent. TSK, TSK, TSK. What is the origin of this chef? The corners of Hades's mouth curled up into a pensive smile. In the end, he opened his mouth wide and stuffed the spicy strip into his mouth. However, he didn't bite it. Instead, he slowly pulled out the spicy strip and sucked it. As he slowly pulled it out, the expression on Hades's face continuously changed. Delicious. It flawlessly blends the spicy taste and the sweet taste together, giving people an indescribable feeling. The aroma of the abyssal chili is so strong that people are reluctant to part with it. Is this the delicacy of the hidden dragon continent? Hades was astonished. This was the first time he had eaten such a unique delicacy. The taste was extremely peculiar, and it was as though it wanted to be deeply engraved in the depths of his mind. It was unforgettable, especially the taste of the abyssal chili. Munch. After sucking it once, Hades started to bite it. As he chewed, his eyes slightly narrowed. Jiangling landed while gasping for breath. That familiar and revered figure in the distance caused her eyes to light up. I finally found that lord. Jiangling was incomparably excited. Her teacher said that as long as she released this lord and passed the jade talisman to him, she would be able to obtain a great opportunity. Moreover, the other party would also give her the thing that her teacher wanted. However, what she didn't expect was that once the other party appeared, after saying a few words to her, he immediately disappeared. He didn't even give her the chance to take out the jade talisman. For the opportunity, Jiangling naturally wouldn't give up. Thus, she searched all the way and finally found this lord. However, this lord's current state seemed a little strange. Jiangling walked closer and saw that incomparably handsome lord squinting his eyes. His face was filled with enjoyment. In his hand, there was a familiar thing that he was holding, and he was continuously chewing on it. That expression was a little wretched. "Lord, what are you doing?" Jiangling had a dumbfounded look on her face. Hades held a spicy strip in his hand. He circled his lips and sucked on the flavor of the spicy strip. His eyebrows moved up and down, and his face was filled with enjoyment. Jiangling looked at him with goosebumps all over her body. So this lord was actually a pervert. Also, wasn't that thing the spicy strip cooked by Bufong? Back then, she lost to this spicy strip, so she was very clear about it. Finally, Hades finished the entire spicy strip. His lips were red and his face was flushed red. As if he had finally discovered Jiangling, Hades squinted his eyes and drew back his red lips. He said, "It's you. Thank you for summoning me over." Jiangling's face was filled with cold sweat. She hurriedly took out a black jade talisman and passed it to Hades. "Lord, this is what my teacher wanted me to pass to you." Hades was stunned. He received the jade talisman, and in the next instant, he smiled. "So you're that guy's descendant. All right, I will fulfill my promise. Follow me first. I have something important to do now." Hearing Hades's promise, Jiangling's heart instantly became excited, as though it was going to jump out of her chest. Lord was actually going to do something important. Furthermore, he was going to bring her along. How exciting! Hades smiled. With a wave of his hand, the two of them instantly disappeared. After a while, Jiangling's face was filled with speechlessness as she looked at Hades's smiling face beside Bufang. Was this the F***king important matter that Lord was talking about? Just to eat another spicy strip? "Teacher, is this really the Lord that you are looking for? I feel that he is a little unreliable." Jiangling's face was filled with confusion. Bufang expressionlessly looked at Hades, who was smiling at him. That Hades's mouth was red and swollen, and his eyes were slightly shining. Bufang turned his head to look at you. "It was obvious that you had given the spicy strip to Hades to eat. Wait, you actually gave food to someone else? Oh my God, this is unbelievable. This little brother, do you still have more of that magical delicacy? Can you give I another one?" Hades said, "Another spicy strip?" Bufang rubbed his chin, glanced at Hades, and indifferently said, "Another spicy strip. Of course I can, 1 for 10,000 crystals. I am honest with you." Jiangling's face twitched. You also blinked her eyes. The smile on Hades's face became even wider. How mischievous. How can this kind of delicacy be measured by crystals? You must treat it with sincerity. Talking about money is an insult to delicacies. Bufang looked at him expressionlessly. "Please speak human words." Hades pursed his lips, swallowed his saliva, and turned his head to look at you. "Last, lend I some crystals. I was in a hurry to go out, so I haven't exchanged them yet." Chapter 589. The currency exchange in the Netherworld was different from that in the Hidden Dragon continent. After all, the two regions had different civilizations. Crystals were the common currency in the Hidden Dragon continent, but in the Netherworld, it did not work. Hades himself did not expect that he would need to spend crystals to come to the Hidden Dragon continent. The atmosphere became extremely awkward. Hades looked at you with a pout, as though he wanted to use his charming eyes to move you. However, he was quickly disappointed. You did not have any expression on her face. She was extremely cold. She did not seem to be moved by Hades's big, watery eyes. She looked at the latter as though she was looking at a piece of wood that could talk. "What is a crystal? Can it be eaten?" you asked. Hades grinned and looked at Bufang with dissatisfaction. "You are very mischievous. Why does this last not need to pay crystals to eat, but I do? Are you jealous that I am more handsome than you?" Jiangling, who was far away, twitched her mouth. Was this really the Lord that teacher had been looking for? Such a shameless existence. Bufang and you were both expressionless. However, Bufang's gaze towards Hades was much more lively. At least, it was not looking at a piece of wood. 15,000 crystals for 1 spicy strip. Bufang raised a finger and said seriously to Hades. Hades sucked in a breath of cold air. This young man actually raised the price. How could there be such a shameless person in this world? "You are definitely jealous of my handsome appearance," Hades said seriously. 20,000 crystals for 1. Bufang raised another finger. Hades's heart was trembling. He looked at you, then at Bufang. His face was filled with despair. How could you treat such a handsome man like this? You will not find true love like this, Hades said bitterly. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched, and he raised another finger. Jiangling, who was far away, could not bear to watch any longer. "Say, Master, I have crystals here. I can lend them to you," Jiangling said. Hades's eyes lit up, and he looked at Jiangling with satisfaction. Little girl, you know how to appreciate beauty. You have a bright future ahead of you. Hades smiled warmly. My lord, I'm just lending it to you. You have to remember to return it. Jiangling felt that she still had to remind this shameless man. Otherwise, her 2 crystals would be like throwing a meat bun at a dog and would never return. If that happened, she would really have to cry on the toilet wall. The Nether King patted his chest loudly. He gave Jiangling a firm promise that he would definitely return the money. Only then did Jiangling pass the 2 crystals to him. Bufang took the 20,000 crystals and looked at Hades as if he was looking at an idiot. He then took out a spicy chili strip from the system's storage space and gave it to Hades. Hades happily took the chili strip and sniffed the rich spicy aroma that spread from the chili strip. His face was filled with infatuation. In the next instant, under everyone's stunned gazes, he opened his mouth and stuffed the chili strip into his mouth, continuously sucking. Bufang looked on in shock. So, the chili strip could be eaten like this? But why did this posture look so stupid? Yu's face was indifferent. Not bad. The taste is really not bad. It's simply godly, too delicious. The spiciness of the abyss and the fragrance perfectly combined together. The feeling of rushing up the throat made I think of I's youth. Hades squinted his eyes and sucked in infatuation. Bufang, who was a little speechless towards Hades, turned around and continued walking. This time, the system's mission was to find the true dragon fruit in the Heaven's secret territory. And after finding the true dragon fruit, he still needed to complete the promotion recipe. The Heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. This was not a small difficulty. As a promotion dish, the Heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup was a test for Bufang after he successfully stepped into the divine physique echelon. Only by completing the Heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup would he have the chance to continue advancing. If Bufang wanted his strength to increase, this mission must be completed. I need to find an ingredient called the true dragon fruit. If you guys want to follow me, then come along, Bufang said. After saying that, he continued walking. Xiao blindly followed behind him. Yu's long eyelashes fluttered, and she also followed. Once Hades saw that you had left, he naturally would not stay at the same spot. While sucking on the chili strip, he also followed. As for Jiangling, she still remembered her 20,000 crystals, so she followed closely behind the Nether King. Thus, this group of people slowly walked in the Heaven's secret territory. The Heaven's secret territory was extremely huge and incomparably vast. Surrounding it were undulating mountain ranges. Wanting to find the true dragon fruit was indeed a little difficult. After walking for a while, the scorching sun in the sky emitted an extremely high temperature. It made everyone feel a burst of dryness in their mouths. Hades happily stuffed the last bit of the chili strip that was the size of a fingernail into his mouth. As he chewed, he looked at Bufang with a puzzled expression. Young man, if you want to find a heaven treasure, then let you help. In a secret territory, what kind of heaven treasure would she not know? Bufang was stunned. Other than eating, you also had this function? It was a little unexpected. You stood on the deck of the Netherworld ship. The wind whistled past, causing the black dress on her body to flutter. She looked at Bufang and expressionlessly said, in finding heaven treasure in the secret territory, if I claimed to be number 2, no one would dare to claim to be number 1. You was very confident. Then why didn't you say so earlier? Bufang rolled his eyes. You didn't ask either, you lightly replied. Help me find the true dragon fruit. When we go back, I'll give you more food. Increase the amount of dragon blood rice. Bufang said. Yu's eyes instantly lit up. She pouted her cute lips, which was too beautiful to behold. The true dragon fruit is in that direction. Follow me. Yu happily pouted her lips, but immediately became serious. She raised her jade-like arm and pointed in a direction. In the next instant, she controlled the Netherworld ship and sped in that direction. Bufang's heart shuddered. True energy also burst out. His feet stepped on the winding mountain road, following the Netherworld ship. Xiao Bai's running was more domineering. Everywhere he passed, The trees were all smashed into pieces by his fan-like hands. Hades lazily strode forward. Every step he took was incomparably leisurely. However, his speed did not decrease in the slightest. He unhurriedly followed behind Bufang. Jiangling's heart surged. This kind of method was indeed extraordinary. Although this Hades was a little shameless, his ability was really strong. Looks like following him was the right choice. Bufang's group of people had a huge momentum, attracting the attention of countless people. There were many people in the Heaven's secret territory. After all, there were countless opportunities in this secret territory. Many people wandered around in search of opportunities. Many people were curious about what Bufang and his group were doing. Hence, they also secretly followed behind the group. In just a short while, the entire group's momentum grew. Brothers, what are they doing? Why are there so many people? I don't know. I saw that there were so many people, so I joined in. With such a huge momentum, they must be going to find something good. We can't go wrong by following them. Fishing in troubled waters, understand? With so many people in a group, how could their goal be something ordinary? A group of clueless onlookers followed behind a group of people. Hence, a vast and long group leisurely moved forward. This kind of power caused many spirit beasts in the Heaven's secret territory to be scared to the point of crawling. Along the way, Bufang's group actually did not meet with any big obstacles. It was really miraculous. Rumble. Suddenly, a deafening sound rang in everyone's ears. That was the sound of a waterfall violently crashing down, like the sound of thunder exploding. Had they arrived? Everyone was shocked. In the next moment, they continued to move forward. They realized that in front of them, there was an extremely remote valley. At the entrance of the valley, there were strange rocks, and the road condition was very bad. However, the crowd did not give up. Many people also followed Bufang and his group, climbing into the valley. Once they entered the valley, everyone was stunned, because the scene in the valley was a completely different world, too beautiful to behold. The waterfall sparkled under the sunlight. The splashes of water that smashed onto the rocks were filled with spiritual energy and filled with a hazy mist. A beautiful rainbow appeared above the waterfall in a semicircle. This was actually a heavenly paradise. Everyone was stunned. Many people even sucked in a breath of cold air. A heavenly paradise was not only a place with dense spiritual energy, but also had many precious treasures. However, the most important point was that a heavenly paradise was very suitable for burial. There were many heavenly paradises in the Heaven's secret territory, but most of them had already been excavated. The heavenly paradise in front of them was completely unknown to everyone. This also meant that this heavenly paradise was a new heavenly paradise. That meant that the treasures inside had yet to be excavated. There were even some inheritances left behind by experts. After all, as a burial ground, there would definitely be inheritances. Some people went crazy, roaring as they charged towards the heavenly paradise. In an instant, the entire valley was in an uproar. Why aren't you going? Hades looked at the incomparably calm Bufang and asked curiously. Those people's craziness and Bufang's calmness formed a stark contrast. No rush. Bufang stood on a rock. As the waterfall smashed down, it raised a strong gust of wind and water vapor, causing the vermilion robe on his body to flutter. Hades smiled warmly. Luckily, you're able to keep your composure. Otherwise, you would already be in danger. Bufang was stunned. Since this last brought us here, it means that there is definitely a true dragon fruit here. Since there is a true dragon fruit, there will definitely be a dragonification tree. And if there is a dragonification tree, it means that there is a dragon corpse buried here. Although the dragon buried in this broken heaven secret territory is definitely not a true dragon, to be able to nurture a true dragon fruit, it definitely has the bloodline of the dragon race. The corner of Hades' mouth curled up as he said, and even if a dragon corpse with the bloodline of the dragon race is dead, the guardian spirit beast that it nurtures is not something that you ants can resist. Just as Hades' words fell, the entire valley began to tremble. In the next instant, the bottom of the waterfall suddenly exploded, and a black shadow fiercely flew out from the pool. Its pitch-black scales shone with a cold light under the sunlight. Its long and narrow body wriggled up, and its roar carried a monstrous stench. This was actually a black flood dragon. Poochie, the black flood dragon, went berserk. With a swing of its tail, it caused the bodies of several experts to explode. Fresh blood splattered all over the ground. Within the pool, there was a bubbling sound. A malevolent-looking black branch that was like a horned dragon slowly rose up. And on that branch, there were 3 black-colored fruits that shone with brilliance. True dragon fruit. Bufong's eyes lit up, and his heart was filled with excitement. That black-colored fruit was the purpose of his trip, the true dragon fruit. It was also an extremely important ingredient in the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. TSK, TSK, TSK. Look at this mischievous black flood dragon. How strong is it? Young man, do you need me, Hades, to make a move? I only need a chilly strip. Hades raised his head 45 degrees, and his deep gaze solemnly said to Bufong. Chapter 590. When Hades said those words, his face didn't blush, and his heart didn't skip a beat. He thought that Bufong would definitely agree to let him take action. This black flood dragon was really hot-tempered. Its body, which was covered with black scales, swayed, raising giant waves that reached the sky. A terrifying aura spread out, making people feel extremely pressured. Many experts were smashed by the black flood dragon's sharp tail, and their bodies were smashed, turning into flesh and blood that scattered in the sky. In this kind of frightening scene, Hades thought that this young man, Bufong, would definitely be a little scared. One chilly strip. You definitely won't lose anything, Hades said seriously. However, when Bufong heard Hades' words, he turned his head to look at him with a strange face. Why do I need you to take action? Bufong asked casually. A moment later, Xiao Bai's purple eyes, which were next to Bufong, flickered, turning ash-gray. A terrifying aura spread out from his body. With a clanging sound, the metal wings on Xiao Bai's back opened. They covered the sky, incomparably domineering. Hades was bewildered. Xiao Bai's body sprinted out like a spring, dashing toward the black flood dragon in the sky. Boom! Violent tremors resounded. The battle in the sky had completely begun. Xiao Bai's purple eyes were radiant. He fought with the black flood dragon. His fan-like big hand pressed the black flood dragon's head, starting to fiercely tear it apart. Facing the powerful black flood dragon, facing the murderous black flood dragon, Xiao Bai didn't retreat even a little bit. This puppet shocked many people. Xiao Opi lay on Bufong's shoulder, spitting out bubbles. His small eyes were round and round. You stood there elegantly. The gale from the falling waterfall fluttered her black dress. She looked very calm, as if she wasn't surprised at all. You see, why do I need you to take action? You even wasted a chilly strip, Bufong said. Hades was a little speechless. This puppet was indeed not ordinary. It was so strong that it collapsed. However, Hades was very unhappy. Because of the existence of this puppet, Bufong didn't even give him a single chili strip. That delicious spicy strip that was filled with the aura of the abyss, he couldn't taste it again. Sigh. Hades let out a long sigh, feeling helpless. You didn't even give me a single spicy strip. Hades' handsome face was filled with melancholy as he looked up at Bufong at a 45-degree angle. The eyes of several experts in the surroundings lit up when they saw that the black dragon was being held back by Xiao Bai. Their gazes landed on the dragon transformation tree in the middle of the waterfall before they stared at the true dragon fruit with greed in their eyes. The true dragon fruit on the dragonification tree was an extremely precious treasure. With a jolt in their hearts, they circulated their true energy and instantly charged towards the dragonification tree. With so many experts making their moves at the same time, the scene instantly became somewhat chaotic. When Hades saw this scene, he felt that his chance had come again. He looked at Bufong, and the corners of his mouth curled up as he said, "Do you want to make a move? If I make a move, I'm 90% sure that the true dragon fruit will definitely be yours. All you need is a chili strip." Bufong looked at Hades as though he was looking at a retard. Why would he waste a chili strip to let Hades make a move? The corners of Bufong's mouth curled up, and the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. With a flourish of the knife, Bufong's figure shot out, leaving Hades dumbfounded. Hades was incomparably resentful. As he looked at Bufong's back, a trace of melancholy appeared on his handsome face. "Really naughty, not even giving me a chili strip." Boom! Around the dragonification tree, a dragon's roar resounded. When many experts approached the waterfall, the black flood dragon, which was entangled by Xiao Bai, suddenly became irritable. The scales on its body stood up, and its body broke free from Xiao Bai's restraint. With a roar, it brought about a gust of wind that swept past, forcing many experts to retreat. Some of them were even directly bombarded by the black flood dragon, causing them to be seriously injured. Among the experts present, the strongest one was only a supreme being who had broken through 4 supreme being shackles. Thus, many people were somewhat unwilling to accept this outcome. Pa! 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 Bufong's true energy covered his feet, and he flew above the waterfall, causing the water to splash up into the sky. His gaze was fixated on the dragonification tree, looking at the true dragon fruit on the tree, and his face was expressionless. When some people saw Bufong make a move, they instantly revealed a playful expression. That puppet was very strong, but Bufong was very weak. A mere brat who had broken through 1 supreme being shackle actually dared to be so impudent in front of the black flood dragon. Everyone just watched, feeling that Bufong would soon be torn to shreds by the furious black flood dragon. Hades, who did not have any chili strips to eat, felt somewhat depressed. He also felt that Bufong was really stingy. A chili strip could invite a big-shot expert like Hades to help him for free, but he actually rejected it. He chose to personally take action, and with a cultivation that had broken through 1 shackle, he faced the black flood dragon, who was at the peak of the divine physique echelon. Was that fellow's head stuffed with a chili strip? Youngsters nowadays are really naughty. Hades gloomily looked up at a 45-degree angle, shaking his head as he sighed. You stood on the netherworld ship, indifferently glancing at Hades. Then, she turned her head to look at Bufong, who was carrying a kitchen knife and rushing toward the black flood dragon. The black flood dragon roared, and the black scales on its neck stood up, shooting out fiercely. Bang! 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 They were like cannonballs exploding, and the entire waterfall was filled with towering waves. Bufong's face was calm, and his mental energy surged out. Through the Shura Tower's amplification, his figure moved at a rapid speed. Every time he moved, he dodged the scales that were shot out. His mental energy was extremely strong, and it was easy for him to do so. Xiao Bai spread his metal wings, and with a whistling sound, he descended from the sky, stepping on the black flood dragon's body. His ash-gray eyes were dazzling. In the next instant, the magic array on Xiao Bai's body surged. Boom! An explosion resounded, and the black flood dragon roared in pain. The magic array on Xiao Bai's body exploded, and the black flood dragon was smashed into the waterfall. The waves surged. Bufong sped through the waves, and he finally got close to the dragonification tree. The experts were all dumbfounded. No one would have thought that this kid, who had only broken through one of the Supreme Being's shackles, could actually dodge the black flood dragon's attack and get close to the dragonification tree. However, in the next instant, when everyone thought that the dust had settled under the dragonification tree, the waves surged. A malevolent mouth opened, and the waves surged. The huge black flood dragon rushed out, and with a bang, it swallowed Bufong. Bufong furrowed his brows. He wanted to jump out of the black flood dragon's mouth, but the huge suction force made it impossible for him to escape. He could only watch as the dragonification tree disappeared in front of his eyes. His line of sight had also turned into darkness. This sudden turn of events caused many people to cry out in alarm. Some were horrified, and some were gloating. A mere supreme being who had broken through one of the supreme being's shackles dared to face the black flood dragon. They really didn't know if this kid was brave or brainless. Hades blinked his eyes, and he pointed at the black flood dragon. He laughed and said, "I told you not to give me a single chili strip. Now you've been eaten." You furrowed her brows, and her black hair, which hung down to her waist, rose and fell. The black energy on her body also quietly spread out, and she was about to make a move. However, you seem to have thought of something, and she expressionlessly dispersed the energy on her body. "I say, lass, do you think that if I make a move to save that youngster now, will he give me a chili strip?" Hades thought a serious question, and he turned his head to ask you. You glanced at him indifferently. Make a guess. Hades rolled his eyes. This lass was becoming more and more aloof. However, according to that youngster's stingy character, he definitely wouldn't give a chili strip. It seemed like he had to let this lass be a witness, in case that youngster turned hostile and refused to acknowledge his debt. If that happened, I would be at a disadvantage. There's no need. Bufong is fine, you said indifferently. Huh? Hades was stunned. He was swallowed by the black flood dragon, and he was about to become the black flood dragon's dung. How could he be fine? This lass was too confident in that youngster. Suddenly, Hades froze, and he turned his head to look. He saw that the black flood dragon, which had been smashed into the water by Xiao Bai's fist, suddenly started to struggle violently. Its abdomen bulged, and it seemed as though there was a huge creature growing inside. Rip! In the next instant, a deafening dragon roar resounded. The black flood dragon's abdomen was torn from the inside out. Fresh blood dripped, and a fishy smell filled the air. A huge black wok emerged from the black flood dragon's abdomen. A shadow stood by the black wok, carrying a dazzling golden kitchen knife. Bufong's face was emotionless. True energy surged, and the vermilion robe on his body seemed to ripple, evaporating the flood dragon's blood. The deafening dragon roar came from the dragon bone kitchen knife. Facing this massive dragon might, the weak dragon bloodline in the black flood dragon's body was instantly stimulated, and its body shivered. Xiao Bai's metal wings spread open. He landed, punching the black flood dragon's head. The black flood dragon's head was hit hard. A terrifying battle broke out, and energy wreaked havoc. After a while, everything returned to normal. Because the boiling energy evaporated the water, the surface of the waterfall was hazy. No one could see the scene inside. They didn't know what the result would be. However, many people's hearts were already trembling. The scene of Bufong carrying the kitchen knife and jumping out of the black flood dragon's abdomen had completely shocked them. Swish! In the hazy mist, a huge figure slowly appeared. Soon, that figure became clear. Bufong, wearing the vermilion robe, stepped on the surface of the waterfall. He held a dragonification tree in one hand, and the other hand played with the pitch-black true dragon fruit. The dense spirit energy spread out, and Bufong was quite satisfied. Xiao Bai's chubby figure followed behind Bufong. Its metal wings had already been retracted, and its fan-like hand grabbed the black flood dragon's tail, slowly dragging the black flood dragon's lifeless body out. The black flood dragon's scales cracked, and fresh blood dyed the waterfall red. This scene caused many people to be shocked. Walking back to the shore, Bufong's body didn't even have a drop of water on it. With a calm face, he flipped his hand and put the dragonification tree into the system dimensional bag. He only left a true dragon fruit in his hand. As for the black flood dragon's huge corpse, after Bufong sized it up, he nodded in satisfaction. It's a pretty good ingredient. I can make sweet and sour flood dragon ribs for Blackie when I get back. Patting the black flood dragon's corpse, Bufong waved his hand, and the huge black flood dragon's corpse disappeared. The people in the distance swallowed their saliva, looking at the true dragon fruit in Bufong's hand enviously. Some people's hearts were spinning, and they wanted to snatch it. However, when they saw Xiao Bai glaring at them like a tiger watching its prey, and Hades, whose face was full of melancholy. They gave up on the idea. Bufong returned to Yu's side, playing with the true dragon bone, and a satisfied expression appeared on his face. Hades looked at Bufong with hidden bitterness. "You young man, you're so naughty. Why do you have to make things so complicated? It's just a chili strip, and I can help you settle in minutes. It's just a black flood dragon, and I can crush it with one finger." Bufong glanced at Hades, and the corners of his mouth curled up. A chili strip suddenly appeared in his hand, and under Hades's bright eyes, he stuffed it into his mouth. A chili strip costs 20,000 crystals. It's the real deal, and I don't cheat anyone. Do you want one? Bufong waved the chili strip in his hand and said calmly to Hades. Hades swallowed his saliva, and his handsome face was full of melancholy. "You young man, you're really naughty." Chapter 591. Bufong rolled his eyes at Hades's words. Slowly stuffing the chili strip into his mouth, he chewed it unhurriedly. As the chili strip flowed into his stomach, it immediately released a dense amount of true energy. The true energy spread to his limbs and bones, causing him to feel much better from the feeling of weakness in his body. In the stomach of the black flood dragon, Bufong pushed his true energy to the limit. Only then was he able to cut open the black flood dragon's stomach. His current cultivation was still too weak. Almost all of the true energy in his dantian was used up before he could cut open the flood dragon's stomach. The taste of the chili strip was good, but the recovery effect was even better. However, this made Hades drool. Hades seemed to have a special liking for the chili strip. The aura of the deep abyss made him extremely intoxicated. However, Hades did not have money. He could only watch as Bufong slowly ate the chili strip. He even licked the remaining spicy juice from the corner of his mouth. Gulp! Hades felt as if there was a small hand constantly scratching his heart, making it difficult for him to endure. He turned his head to look at Jiangling. Jiangling was stunned. Her body instantly tensed up, and she stared at Hades with extreme vigilance. "Your Excellency, don't even think about it. You still owe me 20,000 crystals." Jiangling said. A hint of melancholy appeared on Hades's handsome face. "You youngster, you are really calculative. I didn't say that I won't return it to you." It seemed that borrowing crystals from Jiangling would not work. However, Hades did not give up. He turned his head to look at you. "What are you looking at?" "I don't need crystals to eat the chili strip," you said calmly. Hades instantly felt as if an invisible arrow had pierced through his heart. It made him so upset that he wanted to vomit blood. Rumble. Suddenly, the ground started to shake. The pool of the waterfall suddenly shook. The waterfall that was pouring down began to slowly split apart, splitting into two sides. A pitch-black cave appeared behind the waterfall. There was actually another world within this valley. Many people were shocked by the scene that suddenly appeared. In the next moment, everyone burst into an uproar. They came back to their senses and were extremely excited. This is a powerhouse's relic. There are great opportunities and great opportunities inside. Someone exclaimed loudly. There is a mysterious energy fluctuation coming out from the dark hole. The experts around the waterfall went crazy. They glanced at each other and shot out their true chi, rushing towards the entrance of the waterfall. They didn't care about the dragonification tree, and they could ignore the true dragon fruit. But when the ruins of a powerhouse appeared, no one could remain calm. No one knew what was in the ruins of a powerhouse, but it was definitely something good. That was an opportunity that belonged to everyone. Bufong seemed to be shocked by this sudden scene as well. He turned his head to look at the source of the commotion and saw a group of crazed experts rushing into the waterfall. He did not expect that there would be a relic hidden in this place. The black flood dragon and the dragonification tree were the key to opening the ruins. Now that the black flood dragon was killed by Bufong, the ruins automatically surfaced. "Young man, don't you want to go and take a look at the ruins? What if there's something good inside?" Hades looked at Bufong and encouraged him. However, this time, he was going to be disappointed. That was because Bufong was really not interested in the so-called ruins of a powerhouse. Previously, he appeared in the ruins of the Supreme Blade Tyrant because he was forcefully taken in by the ruins. This was not his original intention. Compared to the ruins, Bufong felt that it was more important to return to the restaurant and cook the heavenly gray Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Not interested, Bufong said indifferently and kept the true dragon fruit in his hand. He patted Xiao Bai's belly and started to size up the valley. This valley was rich in spiritual energy, and there were many precious spiritual ingredients growing here. Some of these spiritual ingredients could not be wasted. After Bufong chose some useful and precious spiritual ingredients, he clapped his hands and let out a long breath. Let's go back. Bufong turned around and said to you. You was taken aback. Did Bufong really not want to enter the ruins? That was the ruins of a powerhouse. Okay. However, you did not choose to ask. After nodding her head, she was about to activate the Netherworld ship. You was the Netherworld woman of the secret realm. As long as she had the Netherworld ship, she could leave the secret realm at will. She did not need to use the teleportation array. Go back. Go back to where? Lass, you can't leave the ruins as you please. Those old fellows in the Netherworld are already criticizing you for leaving the ruins. Hades listened to the conversation between Bufong and you and furrowed his brows. You was the Netherworld woman who was exiled. She had to endure enough curses. Only when the effects of the curses disappeared would she be able to return to the Netherworld. Before that, the Netherworld woman had to stay in the secret realm and ride the Netherworld ship endlessly. Although he was Hades, he was unable to remove the Netherworld woman's curse. Moreover, those old fellows were not easy to deal with. You expressionlessly turned around and looked at Hades. We want to return to Bufong's restaurant. There are a lot of chili strips there, you said seriously. Let's go back. This miasma in the secret realm is really boring. We need the warmth of a home. Let's go. Let's go together. It's on the way. Hades flicked his black hair and said to you with a face full of melancholy. The corners of Bufong's mouth twitched. Was this really Hades? The legendary lord of the Netherworld? Why didn't he have the temperament of an awesome person? He was even more amusing than Nangong Wuk. He really did not know what kind of sparks would fly when these two amusing people met. Lord, are you leaving just like that? Jiangling was a little confused. Why did they leave just like that? The relic was right in front of them, and they did not even bother to explore it. How could they be worthy of the relic that was meticulously laid out? That was a fortuitous encounter. She, Jiangling, was a little reluctant to let go of this opportunity. Lord, I've already missed a fortuitous encounter. This time I cannot miss it. Jiangling's face became serious as she looked at Hades seriously. Previously, in order to summon Hades, she had missed the inheritance of the Supreme Blade Tyrant. Now that the relic was right in front of her, she could not miss it. Hades, who had jumped onto the Netherworld ship, seemed to feel the seriousness on Jiangling's face. He looked at her seriously. I understand. Don't worry and go boldly. Go and chase after the fortuitous encounter that belongs to you. Your 20,000 crystals. When we meet again, I will return it to you. If Hades did not add the last sentence, Jiangling would really be a little touched. However, Jiangling's real goal was not this. Lord, you promised to give me the fortuitous encounter. When I return from the relic, I will go and find you. Jiangling's body jumped up high, and the four true energy chains behind her swayed. Her head full of white hair covered her face. As she spoke, she flew towards the relic. Hades looked at Jiangling's disappearing figure. He stood on the Netherworld ship and sighed. Youngsters these days, so mischievous. Rumble. In the sky, a terrifying energy wave surged over. The true energy that filled the sky seemed to have turned into clouds. A figure walked through the air. Every step he took caused torrential ripples to spread across the sky. It was an old man, a white-haired old man wearing an alchemist robe. He crossed the void and directly entered the relic. It seemed like the relic this time was not ordinary. Even such an existence was alarmed. It was not just one such expert. There was a red sword light that tore through the sky. The true energy that filled the sky seemed to want to tear apart everything. On top of the red long sword, a person stepped on it. Riding on the sword, he rapidly flew into the relic. Some people rode on eagles, and some came on foot. However, without a doubt, the aura of these people was terrifyingly strong. Bufang was quite surprised. I told you, if you don't go to the relic, you will suffer a great loss. Look, so many powerful people have entered the relic. Do you regret it? Hades said to Bufang. However, Bufang still shook his head. The aura of these experts far surpassed any of Bufang's previous opponents. It was very likely that they were a group of divine soul realm experts. Facing these experts, the chances of Bufang snatching the fortuitous encounter were very small. Since the chances were small, Bufang would not choose to go. He might as well return to the restaurant and cook the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. A creaking sound rang out. The netherworld ship slowly rose into the sky. You stood in front of the deck. Her waist-length black hair fluttered in the wind. She raised her palm, and an invisible force fluctuated. With a ripping sound, the space was directly torn apart. The speed of a netherworld ship suddenly increased. In the next instant, it once again tore apart the space, slowly emerging from the vault of heaven. Two crescent moons quietly hung in the sky. That calm space trembled, and a black wooden ship emerged from the torn space. The torn space quickly returned to normal. Buzz, a majestic wave of air surged, and the netherworld ship floated not far from the ground. Wow, it's really a nostalgic feeling. Although the spiritual energy here is much thinner than in the netherworld, the air here is very fresh. It makes people feel refreshed. On the netherworld ship, Hades' Era stepped on the void, spinning around. He squinted his eyes and spread his arms, his face full of satisfaction. You, Bufang, and the huge Xiao Bai jumped off the netherworld ship. With a boom, it caused a huge tremor. In the distance, the Cloud Mist restaurant stood quietly. Under the illumination of the moonlight, it seemed to be covered with a layer of cool silk. Bufang also squinted his eyes, looking at the Cloud Mist restaurant. His heart felt at ease. He really enjoyed this feeling. Compared to the secret realm with thick spiritual energy and many treasures, Bufang still liked his small kitchen. Opening the bronze door of the restaurant, Bufang clasped his hands as he walked into the restaurant. You waved her hand, and the netherworld ship instantly dashed into the restaurant, quietly landing under the Path Understanding tree. With a loud thud, the Path Understanding tree trembled. Leaves fell from the tree and landed on Lord Dog's nose, who was snoring loudly. It made Lord Go feel a little itchy, and he sneezed. Lord Go opened his drowsy dog eyes, looking at Bufang, who had stepped into the restaurant under the moonlight. With a magnetic voice, he said, Bufang, kiddo, you're back. Outside the restaurant, Hades, who was floating in the void, suddenly moved his ears. His eyes opened, and his handsome face trembled. He took a deep breath, looking at the Cloud Mist restaurant. His eyes seemed to emit light, as if he could see the entire Cloud Mist restaurant clearly. Under the Path Understanding tree, Lord Go felt something. He lazily raised his head, looking at Hades, who was floating in the void outside the restaurant. A man and a dog looked at each other through the ceiling. It's that damn old man. Lord Go was stunned. Hades, on the other hand, heaved a sigh of relief. This black dog is as fat as a ball. It's definitely not that shameless mangy dog. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.